There are a great many qualities of humanity living in this story. Some people are called scumbags, and they're worse than a demonic cult. But the protagonist thinks they're monsters. And then there are the dumb jocks, for whom nothing is more important than martial arts. And they are irrational bastards who crave nothing but power. And this is the greatest clan in the world. That's what everyone thought of the Namgung clan. One ordinary day, the pub where the residents were relaxing was still full and filled with alcoholics. Someone inside suddenly shouted that the drinks were on him, but he was asked what was the occasion. The guy answered them with a question asking if they had forgotten that today was the election of the deputy clan head, but his friends answered him that the eldest son of Dae Namgung, the blue sky dragon, would be the one. The guy started to deny and said that they shouldn't discount the second son, Jun Namguung, the dragon of clear sky, but the third guy couldn't stand their argument and told them to settle down. After all, we must not forget about the new rising dragon, Seo Namgung, the third son. After all, there is a competition to decide who is worthy of becoming the deputy head of the strongest clan. And these three are incredibly talented. Of course, it wouldn't even be surprising if one of them were to take the position. After all, they are the sons of Hanchol Namgung, the clan head. But suddenly the guy remembered and asked his friends if they had heard of the youngest. The man just inhaled and replied that the youngest was a good-for-nothing scumbag who must have gone into hiding again. The man with the mustache got scared and told him to be quiet, in case someone from the clan heard him. And he lowered his voice and said that he should say garbage, not even good for compost. The man couldn't stand it and started laughing loudly, while the youngest son stood behind them and heard everything. The youngest son realized that everyone was just calling him scum. After all, he is Deso Namguung. Deso knew that his brothers had inherited their father's talents, which is why they were nicknamed the Three Dragons. But he's not just falling short of them, he's not even a mid-level dragon. He lost in a fight to replace the deputy head, and his Dantian was destroyed. And now Deso decides he's going to leave it all to hell and kill himself. Suddenly that afternoon, an interesting old man came to his table and asked him if there was a seat available. But Deso couldn't even answer him, and blushing simply picked up the bottle and poured himself a drink. But the elder was naive and slowly sat down and said that silence was a sign of agreement. But suddenly Deso spilled a little alcohol during the spill and got angry. But he didn't get upset and turned to the manager and ordered 5 more bottles. After finishing all these 5 bottles, he just grabbed his head and looked only at his empty glass. But suddenly the elder spoke and said that 8 years ago his wife and child had been killed by bandits, and he had been grief-stricken, and now the little boy reminded him of him in those years. But Deso got angry and told the old man to shut his mouth and continue drinking. But the old man went on to say that he had tried his best to find the culprits, but had failed. And then he thought, what if it was possible to go back in time? Deso could not stand it, and with strong blows on the table asked the old man, is he not thinking at all? But the visitors did not like it, and the bald, menacing man said that they are not alone here, and they should stop making noise immediately if they cared about their lives. Deso looked at them with a drooping head and replied that they wouldn't anymore. The old man became very funny after such an incident, and went on to say that after 8 years he had finally created the technique. But now that it was time to try it out, there was no way he could decide to do so. Deso sighed and said there's nothing to say, it just sucks, and the day's shit, and the grandfather's getting to him. And the crazy old man wouldn't let it go. But Deso couldn't stay on his feet after so many bottles of booze, and he got sick. But the old man just saw it with his magic powers and caught him, and said that the boy was too drunk. But Deso didn't even pay attention to that and turned around and said that he would go himself. And the old man thanked him for listening to him, who had nowhere else to go. But Deso got a little uncomfortable and asked him why he was picking on him. Once outside, Deso felt very bad, and breathing in the fresh air, he remembered the old man's words, who had nowhere else to go, and decided that if he thought hard enough, he had nowhere to go either. He was so useless that he'd been kicked out of the clan, and all his money had just been pissed away. And now he wondered what he should do next. Suddenly, with slow steps, he saw leaves under his feet, and he was a little shocked. He was surprised because he didn't realize how he had gotten up the mountain, but he found trouble along the way. A man reached him and asked him if he had any money. Deso knew right away it was a bandit. so he told him he had nothing. But the bandit was stubborn and asked the boy if he was sure. Deso replied that he was. But Bandit this time did not take no for an answer, and pulled out his sword and thrust it right into Deso's chest. Deso didn't even realize how it happened, and started bleeding, not realizing why he was being treated like that. Deso just fell to the ground after the blow and wondered if he was going to die like that. The bandit approached the guy and decided to search the guy's pockets and find something. But suddenly he pulled out a strange piece of paper, which seemed very familiar to him, which he was very surprised. But then he said it was just a piece of paper, and there really wasn't anything to take from this guy. Throwing that paper away, it was just covered in Deso's blood. And so now he realized what that strange sensation was. And when he had it, he thought. But in a moment he began to remember. And he remembered that during the time the old man had caught him in the act of falling in the tavern. Deso got really funny and said that the damn old man had even managed to get him towards the end. Deso looked at the paper and said that the old man could at least write more legibly. He couldn't understand anything. Suddenly he felt very thin that he remembered all the moments of his life. And all that was in his life, he once again squandered before his eyes the hard money in the Namgung family. And now, opening his eyes, he saw that he was surrounded by strange people playing with him. And now he wondered if he wasn't dead. But Deso took a closer look, and the ceiling looked very familiar to him. And he got the feeling that he knows all these women but he can't understand one thing. How does he know them? But after looking around the room well, he realized that he was in the Namgung clan's manger. He remembered that they were built especially for his mother, the first lady of the clan. This was where he and his brothers grew up. But how did he end up here? Deso thought. Suddenly, the girl said she had brought him a nanny. Deso turned around and immediately changed his view of this nanny. The nanny turned out to be very cruel to him, which made him start screaming. But the girls around him were very happy and thought that the gentleman liked everything. After a year, Deso began to walk on his own legs. The girls were still with him and rejoiced at every event. Deso was developing very fast and didn't even realize how he was doing. The girls just watched and cried with happiness. But Deso heard the screams of struggle and could not get used to it in any way. And now he realized pretty quickly that he was back in the past. And the girl picked him up and said she would put him to bed now. Deso realized that he was now 2 years old, and in 18 years he would have to fight for the title of deputy head with his older brothers. But first, he thought, maybe if he tried he could make it, since he'd been given a second chance. But he'd already given up. But he remembers how hard it is when he has no talent. Moreover, there's no way for him to surpass them. All this time he was trying to think how he could live without caring. But immediately he decided that he needed to escape from the clan. Strongly relieved that he had found a solution, he was a little overreacting, for the diaper immediately filled with shit. But he already knew what to do. At such moments he just started crying and asked the servants for help. And now that he's 3, he's going out for walks, so he could get a good look at the nursery. As he looked around the corridor, he saw paintings by unknown artists and a whole bunch of vases. And here he was, already wondering how much he could get for them. But his face seemed very strange to the girl. But Deso realized that in order to live up to expectations and not tarnish the reputation of the clan, he worked hard. After 20 years of hard training, he had only reached the 3rd rank. And while his Dantian was being destroyed, everyone just watched. And they could only see how pathetic he was. And now the mere thought of it made him shiver. So he came up with an escape plan. Before the competition even starts, he's going to announce that he has no claim to anything. If that doesn't work, he'll run away with more money, somewhere where the Namgung clan won't get him. That means that before he turns 20, he has to save up as much as he can. And this house is full of valuables, just like the strongest clan. And there's a lot of money to be made from it. And to hell with martial arts. Deso decided to show all his emotions without even noticing the people around him. The girl, seeing this, said that the Lord seemed to be in a good mood today. Deso replied that it was true, and he liked the painting very much. The girl asked if it was with a dragon, and told that it was given to them by the consul. Deso immediately realized that it could fetch at least 10 gold pieces. And after 2 years, the girl saw how he had already started to carry valuable things from the clan. Deso resisted and shouted that he would sell it to build a big house where he would live with the old nanny and all the maids. The girl was surprised and asked him, Was he so reluctant to part with them? But Deso asked her in reply, "Does she wish it?" The girl replied that she did not. That's not what she meant. Deso realized that he was originally going to escape alone, but his plan had changed. At least in that life, at least now, the maids treat him well. And if he ran away, they'd just be put out on the street. And who would look after them if not him, Deso thought. But the girl had told him that they were different from the other servants. Deso didn't understand and asked what she meant. The girl replied that all those who serve the clan are famous martial artists, and they, with the exception of the head maid, were orphans whom the lady took pity and hired, and they don't want to get in the way of his great accomplishments. They don't know how to fight anyway. Deso asked her, "Is that the end of it?" The girl, hearing this, was very surprised and did not expect such a question from him. The boy started laughing and told her not to worry. And does she know what his dream is? And what is his great plan? To lay low and live happily ever after. But Deso realized that he, the youngest son of the strongest clan whose father is the greatest warrior and whose brothers are also geniuses, it was too much. The Namgung clan is already in his neck of the woods, and now he's definitely not going to become a great warrior. Deso handed her the vase and told the girl not to worry, and took it to the heavenly bank and put it in his name. The girl was surprised and replied to the Lord that not that she suspected him of anything, but the vase belonged to the clan. And shouldn't he ask the head's permission first? Deso thought it was a joke and replied that her father didn't care about trinkets. He's only interested in martial arts, and he's sure as hell busy practicing even now. At this time, in the Namgung clan head's mansion, he was waiting for a guest. The guest suddenly appeared and told the head that the young master had stolen the vase again. The head pretended that he understood everything, and so did his son's purpose. But he wondered why he was doing everything in the open. The next Deso asked the servants if everything was ready. The girl replied to the Lord that yes, she had prepared everything. Deso turned around and said that today he would leave the palace. And in 8 years he had even somehow grown to love it, and saying goodbye to it was like a balm to his soul. He realized consciously that he had pocketed most of the vases and paintings. There was nothing more for him to do here. His wrestling-crazed father and brothers must be mindlessly training. His older brother should have reached the rank of master by now. The second in seniority topped the first rank, and the third only approached the first rank. And he had worked hard before, wanting to catch up with them. And now, he hadn't practiced for a day. Deso raised his hands and wanted to look at his calluses, and they must be coming soon. But suddenly, a large gate suddenly opened and 2 guards entered. Deso already realized that they would appear from time to time. And this is the Purple Blood Squad. The chief said that they, the Purple Blood Squad, and welcomed the junior master of the great Namgung clan. Deso looked at them and saw that they were making perfectly honed movements, and it was best not to mess around with them. In front of him now stands the Purple Blood Captain leading the squad. Although he must be the only captain in the world working as a gardener, but he has reached the rank of Grand Master. Outside the Namgung clan, he would be revered on par with the elders of the martial arts schools. And he realized that it was time for him to enter the tiger's den. Heading towards his family, he rejoiced and was happy. But as he traveled, he thought, what did the captain say to him there? He had told earlier that the consul had cut his support 5 years ago. It must have been hard on him. But Deso still grew up strong and healthy. Heaven favored him. The boy didn't understand and asked the captain what he was talking about. The captain was surprised and replied that the Lord was not even a little bit discouraged, and no matter what happened on the way, they would protect him at the cost of their lives. The others also immediately raised their hands and started shouting that they would definitely dust him off. Deso thought so. The Scarlet Blood's problem was old-fashioned thinking. That's why they're interrupting themselves with all sorts of part-time jobs. But how to understand him, the boy thought. He doubted the captain would lie to a member of a neutral faction, and he must be just mistaken. As far as he was concerned, support had only increased in those 5 years. Suddenly, Kanyu said they had arrived. Deso jumped off the wagon and looked at the huge doors in front of him, was knowledgeably surprised, and realized that all the direct descendants of the clan were waiting right outside the door, though they'd rather want to assess what he was capable of than welcome him. But first impressions are more important than anything else. So Deso decided that he would just make a fool of himself. and let them see that he didn't have the slightest talent for martial arts. Deso stormed inside, thinking that his plan was perfect. And if everything goes as planned, everything will work out. But suddenly, he saw a huge foot in front of him, which was draining a lot of pressure out of him. In front of him stood the strongest warrior, the god of martial arts, and the head of the Namguang clan, his father. But he knew that he would be greeted by his family. But where did his father come from? In his previous life, he was always training. He didn't come out to greet him or even his brothers. The captain approached the head and said that the first unit welcomed the head of the greatest Namguang clan. The head replied to the captain that he was free to go. And then Deso thought, would he be able to fool his father? If he was exposed, what would happen to him then? Deso immediately became a pie boy in front of his father. And suddenly, the head said he was still waiting for him to greet him. And he saw that his son understood perfectly well who stood before him. Deso in his head knew, but he can't even breathe from that pressure. The head told him if he didn't know, he would have to execute all his maids for failing to train him. Deso knew that his father was indeed capable of such things. When his Dantian was destroyed, he didn't bat an eye. He's just an inhuman monster who doesn't even care about his child. Deso, through the pain, decided he wouldn't let him do it. He raised his hands and said that he welcomed the head of the glorious Namguang clan. The head decided to throw a feast on the arrival of his youngest son and called all the famous people. One of the guests suddenly raised his glass and began to say that it was time to toast the young lord on such a momentous day. Deso was embarrassed and still could not recover from the incident. And thank goodness his father immediately left as he greeted him. Deso, at this point, asked his father, why did he even bother coming? And now his plans shouldn't be affected. But suddenly he remembered his brothers, and he would not want to quarrel with them. And now he's no match for them. And he'd be the cute little squishy little brother. But he remembered that his mother was considered the first beauty, and he was like her. Deso suddenly told his brothers that they could continue to fight over the role of deputy head, and he could stay away. But once outside the clan, the guests said that they regretted not seeing what the youngest was capable of. But someone replied that there was nothing they could do about it. Only a direct descendant of the clan was allowed to do that. But the elder then said that when the guests had left, it was time to begin the first test. He told his servants to bring it in. Bringing in the huge stone balls, the elder said that today, young master, was not only his welcoming ceremony, but also the day they would test what a direct descendant of the Namguang clan could do. Deso immediately realized that here was the beginning of his test. Stretz said that he would be tested on 3 criteria. First, they would evaluate his strength, and now he must understand the steel balls. Deso didn't bother much, and approaching the smallest ball, he lifted 0.5 kilograms. One of the brothers said, "It's boring here. Is there anyone in the clan who can't lift at least 10 kilograms? But his brother told him he was right. The eldest lifted 250, the second 200, and the third 150. And he's sure the younger one will lift 100. And so Deso approached the ball with 50 kilograms. But he couldn't lift it, or even pretend to. Deso replied that it was too hard for him, and everyone immediately started yelling that he was a loser and couldn't get any worse. They kept judging him, saying it's a total failure, and it's a waste of time for them. But Deso realized that he could lift 100 kilograms thanks to inhuman training. Of course, he couldn't lift half that now. The old man said it was time to start the third agility test. Deso agreed and ran to pass it. Deso tried to steady himself on the logs, but his plan caused him to stumble and fall on purpose. The guests were very much distressed, and they couldn't look at it anymore. But Deso saw that things were going smoothly for him so far. The elder had also gotten used to all this, and said that he would now be tested on his ability to sense chi. Deso looked at his brothers, and realized that the only ones left were his brothers, their closest allies, and those in key positions in the clan. And now he was sure, until the day of the competition, they would be looking out for him. But that's okay. He'll let them know once and for all that he's not interested in martial arts. And he doesn't need their clan, even if they serve it to him on a platter. The old man went on to say that in this test, he would have to demonstrate the secret breathing technique of the Namguang clan. Deso began to just play around during the competition. While the guests thought he was a jerk and wondered what he was so excited about, but the head wasn't left out either, and decided to watch his youngest son right from the heights of his clan. The elder approached the younger one and said that he would not teach him the technique. Like he said, it is a secret of their clan, but it serves as the foundation for the other techniques, so it must be mastered first. Let Deso move the chi energy as he tells him to, and once it stabilizes in his dantian, the test will be passed. Deso knew already that the last test was the most important. Even though he had failed the past ones, things could change now. Therefore, he should fail with a bang. The old man placed his hands on his back and said he was starting. While Deso felt the chi energy forming inside him, the old man told the kid that with his help, he had just completed the first round of the great breathing technique. And did the kid remember it? Deso actually remembered everything. After all, he had been practicing for 20 years. It was usually used to set the foundation of the dantian and then master more advanced techniques. But he still hadn't been able to do that. The old man told him to try it himself now. Deso heard these words and was overjoyed, for he had been waiting for this moment for a long time. And now he'll confuse all the meridians, and for the next couple of years he would not be able to train. Deso was glad, for his plan was about to come true. Deso stood in the lotus posture and mentally realized that it was time to act, and let it be already laid out, so it would be easy to repeat it. In the moment of the ordeal, Deso fully understood what he needed to do, and in the moment decided to go in the other direction of energy. Suddenly, the pain just shot through his body and he crumpled like discarded paper. Deso turned back around and realized that it was impossible to show that he was in pain. And now it wasn't enough to just slightly confuse the paths. He needs to mess things up so badly that he can't become a head even in his dreams. So he decided to confuse all the meridians. He knew that the Namgung clan has the best healers, so he would be cured anyway. He decided that he would confuse everything so that he wouldn't be able to get out of bed for several years. The guests look at all this and see that something is already wrong. Didn't they think he was somehow not feeling well? Deso began to feel a severe stabbing pain and realized that 3 years in bed was already assured for him. When he saw Deso couldn't help himself and just fell to the ground. The old man immediately started yelling for a healer to come and help him. Deso already realized that this was the end of it. Even if he recovered, he wouldn't be able to reach the third rank. He would slowly recover and show them that he didn't care about training. That's the perfect plan. But then, suddenly, the head came down and told everyone to stop. The sons were shocked that their father had been present for the whole ordeal. The head took his youngest son in his arms and said he was taking him away. And have Elder Wanju bring a divine healer to the mansion, and he's sure the healer is drunk again. The head just vanished with his son, and lastly said that the ceremony was over. The eldest son said that the meridians get tangled and the paths just tear. And that's what happens when the chi energy is too weak. And Deso has no strength, no agility, no sense of chi. He can practice all he wants, but he won't get any better. But Heavenly Sword Squad Captain Nam Guing Hak said that the problem is that, for some unknown reason, the head favors the junior. At this time in the clan head's mansion, Elder One just ran to Master Physician and burst into his room with both feet. But the elder immediately covered his mouth with his hands from the smell. After all, the room simply reeked of alcohol. Elder Wan started shaking him and yelling that he was summoned by the clan head. But the healer did not wake up and mumbled under his breath. Suddenly, the Lakar said that he didn't understand what kind of booze the clan head was drinking. He couldn't get any more into it. Vaughn answered him that the head said if the Lakar didn't show up now, he could personally check if a person could survive with a hole in his chest. The healer came immediately to his senses and shouted asking what the head had yelled out there. Vaughn realized that the head had said no such thing, but could very well do so. The healer just ran out of the room and was indignant. Vaughn was still thinking and didn't understand what was even going on. After all, Yaslim should have had their funding cut 5 years ago. He thought Deso was going to starve to death, and he was alive and well, and the head of the family is supporting him. In order for the Namgung clan to remain the strongest, the weak must be ruthlessly disposed of. He thought he was abandoned because he had no talent. And was it really because of his resemblance to the First Lady? But no. After a few days, Deso came to his senses, but there was a voice nearby that said the Lord had finally opened his eyes. The boy opened his eyes and saw his father and a healer standing in front of his bed. The healer started laughing and said that he no longer thought that a monster like the head himself would be born, and a divine physique. He himself can't even believe it. Deso got up from the bed and thought, "What's going on?" He examined his body and said that he has no pain, and on the contrary, he feels much better. The energy was just beating right through him. The healer started yelling at him and said that since he was awake, let him get up already. Deso asked how long he had been out. A month or two, probably. The healer asked Han Chol if he was definitely his son. The head turned his head to the side and replied that he wasn't sure. Deso was shocked to hear the physician address the head by his first name, and thought he had had enough of life. But he remembered that even the head monk of the Shaolin Temple and the master of the Wudang sect couldn't be so familiar with the strongest warrior. The healer became indignant and said that young people were completely uncultured. He didn't even thank his savior. Deso bowed and thanked the physician for his help, and realized that the whole plan had gone down the drain. In fact, he should have woken up as an invalid who needed constant care, and then he would have said he wouldn't train. And now he can't even pretend to be sick. And why is it so hard to escape from this stupid clan, he thought. And he needs a new plan. Deso started waving his head around and asked the strange man who he was, and "Father, why did he come?" The head looked at him with his menacing gaze and replied to his son, wondering if he had pulled it all off. The boy made a silly look and told his father that he didn't know what he was talking about. But the head told him bluntly that it was pathetic, but he wouldn't get away with it. Whatever he thinks he is, it will soon be revealed. After all, he wouldn't be able to accept that his own son couldn't handle a simple qi circulation. Deso was shocked, for he didn't remember his father ever speaking to him for so long, nor had he ever called him his son. And now Deso noticed that his father was not the same as he had known him. He wouldn't have watched him. If he did, he'd just be disappointed. The healer suddenly told him to move around a bit. Did he feel any pain anywhere? Deso replied that he did not, and everything was fine. The healer rejoiced and said that it couldn't be otherwise. His original body was not suitable for learning martial arts at all. Therefore, he should now feel as if he could roll mountains. Deso just clenched two fists and replied to the man that it was all right, but the healer told the boy that he didn't know if he was a fool or if everything came out by accident. But if it wasn't for him, the kid would have died by now. Deso was just shocked and couldn't believe it. The healer told him that he was born with tangled meridians. Therefore, no matter how much he trained, he wouldn't reach above the third rank. Deso now realized that he really was a real brat. The healer had told him that he had never seen anyone try to fix it. Deso asked, "Wasn't it good that the meridians were now straightened? Now that the flow of energy has been restored, can qi be used?" The healer answered him that he now realized that the little guy knew what he was doing. How could anyone even dare to do such a crazy thing? And now he tells the master that his meridians were tangled, and even if one tried to untangle them, they would still return to their natural state. And the Deso really just wanted to live without worry, and he almost killed himself. But he's fine now. He's cured him. But is that even possible? The kid thought. Everyone is different, so the position of meridians, acupuncture points, and qi energy pathways are also different. He must know countless variations in physique. Deso simply bowed to the healer for saving his life. The healer looked and said that at least he had some manners, unlike his brothers. Hearing those words, Deso was surprised that his brothers had met him too. The healer asked the boy what his name was. Deso immediately introduced himself. The healer was surprised and said that he couldn't believe that two people with divine physiques were living in the same era. In addition, they are father and son. Truly a great blessing. Deso was surprised and asked the healer, "Is he talking about him?" The healer asked him back, "Does he see anyone else here?" Let him rejoice. He would have died if not for his help. He really is blessed. And even if things had turned out differently, he'd be buried by now. But he's not sure if he did the right thing to save him. Who knows how the coexistence of two people with divine physiques would turn out for the martial arts world. The head suddenly told them to stop talking and asked the healer, "Is he saying that this idiot purposely confused his meridians during the test?" The healer replied in a nutshell something like that. Deso realized it was best not to try to understand his father. The head asked the healer if his son would be able to study martial arts. Lihan replied that yes, he would. He had stabilized his meridians, but he would not be able to master most of the arts. The head asked, "Does that include the great breathing technique?" The healer replied that even that his meridians would not be able to withstand it, and as soon as he tried to use it, they would simply tear. Then even he would be unable to help him. The head immediately said that now he was really questioning whether this was his son. But Deso rejoiced at these words. After all, even a father would not go against the divine healer's words. Suddenly, the head called out to the first agent. Suddenly, a shadow appeared beside him, and a man came out of it, and it was an agent from the Shadow Squad. Deso knew that it was the strongest squad in the Namgung clan, protecting the clan head. So where did he come from? The head immediately ordered him to bring everything. The warrior immediately appeared and presented a book with 3 basic swordsmanship techniques. The head further handed the book to his son and said that it was just fine for him. Pathetic techniques for a pathetic brat. Deso looked at the book and saw what it was for, and realized that it was a third-rank book that could be bought at any shop, and an entry-level technique that doesn't even need chi. It only explains the basics of swordsmanship on the surface. And yet, my father hasn't changed a bit. He's already given up on him. And now he would train after his sleeves and try to come up with a new plan. Deso left the room and grabbed his stomach and said he was hungry, and he needed to find something. But now Deso realized that, at that time, he didn't know that because of this book there was a real chaos in the clan. After all, it is actually the Book of the Sword Lord. Deso went straight to the room and, seeing the table, said that he never thought he would come back here after being kicked out. Once inside, the girls saw him and were overjoyed. The girls said that they had already prepared dinner, and the gentleman could come to the table. Deso replied that he was ready to eat anything, but in a moment he wondered why he was trying so hard to please his father and brothers. After all, he had always had sisters who accepted him for who he was. As he entered the house, he was glad, but in truth, he would have to leave it to find an even more luxurious place where he would be free. After Deso ate all the food that was at the table, the girls were shocked at his hunger. The guy said he would go for a walk and they could rest and clean the table for now. As he went out for his walk, he remembered that he met with the divine healer and talked to his father for a bit. He had even given him a book, albeit the most ordinary one. But the divine physique was still not out of his mind, and the fact that the healer spoke of it with certainty, he knew that martial arts distinguished between several types of physique, and the last one, which is considered better than the rest, the divine physique. But it is said to carry the knowledge of heavenly martial arts. This is the physique of a martial arts god. Such people are only born once in an era, and if he got it right, he seems to have it. Deso looked at it and said that it sounded high-minded, but he didn't feel any difference. And even if he did, how could he beat his older brother? In 10 years, he will reach the Grandmaster level. And how can he catch up in 10 years if he doesn't know how to do anything? Even if he was trained by his grandfather himself, it wouldn't work. But Deso grieved, for they had given him false hope. And things may not have gone according to plan, but he still wants to escape from the clan. His father is unlikely to tell the others, and the healer isn't much of a gossip. He'll head for his chambers. Deso went to his bed and said that one of the advantages of living in the strongest clan was not having to worry about his safety. But before he went to bed, he looked at the book his father had given him and decided that reading was the best remedy for insomnia. The book said that the Creator created these 3 techniques in order to reach the heavens themselves. Deso just couldn't help himself and said that he was a better writer than a fighter. And there's not much to it. No deep philosophy like the Wudong sect's arts, no feints like the Huashan sect, no incredible speed that can pierce the sun like the Dianxiang sect, not to mention the vast trove of knowledge possessed by the Shaolin Temple. Nothing at all, just back and forth swings and a horizontal strike. But in the moment, he saw that the Creator had written that there was a mystery, and Deso thought it was a good book. And here's what he couldn't understand. People starting to learn the skill of swordsmanship always think, where is the end? Where is the goal to strive for? But for some, it's the mastery of sword chi. For others, it's the manifestation of chi, and even kinesis or sword of the heart. But there is a long way to go before that. You can't reach the end without starting. Most people don't realize how important the beginning is. Wudong Taiji, Huashan Plum Blossom, the son of Dian Xiang. Bertu has the same beginning. The way he beats it, cuts it, chops it, and the way it gets faster and faster until his strike can pierce the very heavens. And study more complex swings until his sword outlines a plum blossom, and let his strokes become gentle and light to create Tai Chi. And if he's reading this book, surely he understands what he's trying to say. But Deso said no, not one bit. But the creator revealed that he studied all the known martial arts of the world and divided them into 3. And the first one he called the heavens. The second was earth. The third is man. And he is sure that the reader will be able to master them. But he will definitely master the other martial arts as well. Deso said he'd make a great con man. But the shape of the heavens, the shape of the earth, and the shape of man are what he called the 3 basic swordsmanship techniques. Deso closed the book and said he couldn't sleep, and thought he had reread the book, but suddenly he saw a sword next to the door. But of course, Deso is not a fan of practicing at night. But at that time, voices were heard at the top of the clan. The head himself and the physician appeared there. The healer, seeing this, told the head to watch the younger one dragging his sword. And hadn't he been taught that weapons should be valued? But suddenly he was shocked by what he saw. So he asked the head, what had he done to him? The head just drank his alcohol and bluntly replied that nothing. The healer asked, then what is the meaning of this? Deso started practicing and showing elements from the book. The healer was shocked and said he couldn't believe his eyes. And he knows that he gave him the original Sword Lord, but the 3 basic swordsmanship techniques are just the foundation. And how does he order it to be understood? Deso said that in his past life, he made hundreds of thousands of sword swings. The 3 basic techniques are nothing to him. First, he raises the sword upwards as if he wants to pierce the heavens, and freely brings it down, as if connecting heaven and earth. But here, Deso just did a pour of techniques, and that's where he stopped. He opened the book and asked with surprise, is that it? Deso asked the writer if his book was too short. He immediately tossed the book aside and said he could write one himself. The expert is incomplete, and he decided he'd take a couple more swings and go to the side. But he didn't notice that after a couple more strokes, it was morning. The healer and the head had been watching him all this time too and asked, Kid, what's in the trance? Martial trance is a state one can enter. If one practiced hard and received heaven's blessing, some can see what lies ahead, some a whole new path. The healer asked the head, why is he silent? He was wondering to death. But the head replied that he was just waving his sword. The healer began to get indignant and started yelling that he wouldn't believe it in his life. What do? Are they just swinging swords too? The head replied that yes. The healer fell on his ass and said he was killing him. Is this something that only people with divine physique can understand? The head replied that, if it even existed, but it had only just begun. A fragile child who can't even master the breathing technique and is discovering the world of martial arts. After all, he was also born into the strongest clan. He has studied martial arts all his life, and to him was everything. And that life brought him only torment. Exercises that were easy for everyone, he could barely do after 1,000 attempts, and pain. That's what the martial arts were to him. But Deso didn't understand yet. What was that feeling? He was still repeating the movement technique. Deso was immediately glad that he was looking like an elephant, but feeling refreshed. Deso thought, was practicing always this much fun? The head asked the healer what he thought would happen if chi was added to the meridians that were barely holding together. The healer replied that they would tear even from a drop. But the head said that they say the human body is a small universe. In it also everything is destroyed and created again. The healer replied to the head that he was right, but it hardly concerns him. His body is like a dried-up desert that cracks with every step. Therefore, he is completely unaware of what is happening. The chapter replied that it is only purity. The head asked what? The head replied that because of their purity, children can work miracles, and sometimes it leads to major changes. And that's the head replied that these techniques created by the Sword Lord would forever go down in the history of martial arts. It was true that he was far away from it. Even idiots and old people can master it. even someone who is sick and can't master other arts. And the most famous of them is the Shaolin art of muscular transformation, which allows you to create qi while moving. The healer couldn't believe it and asked what the head was saying that these 3 techniques were healing his body. The head replied to him that he was finally justifying the title of divine healer. The healer said that's why he could feel qi from him, albeit weak. The head replied that the sword lord had created extremely interesting techniques. The healer was shocked that the head was smiling, but the head told him, wasn't he wondering what would happen if the dried earth listened even more? But Deso also felt powerful at this moment and asked, "What's going on?" Deso suddenly dropped his sword and asked himself, hadn't he stayed up all night and practiced? After all, he had decided not to study martial arts to escape from this den of monsters. Deso suddenly grabbed his heart and asked, why is it fluttering like that? But he still wants to train until he falls down without strength. And an old eagle is better than a young raven. Is it all because he has the blood of the Namgung clan flowing in him? Suddenly the girl came up and asked the Lord if he would like to wash himself. Deso didn't believe it, and asked Granny if it was true that he had been practicing all night. The grandmother replied that when she came to check on him, he was swinging his sword without stopping. And had he not slept at all? Deso replied that no, he was going to go wash up. The healer asked the head if he thought the guy knew. The head replied that there was no more booze and left. The healer started to get indignant and asked if he knew. Afterward, he just sat on the roof and saw something glistening on the guy's chest. It's as tiny as a grain and so fragile it could break at any moment. But the qi has really awakened in him. And now he realizes that this is such a divine physique. Afterward, he headed to the boy's house to check his health. The healer said that such injuries usually take 4 months to heal, but he thought that the boy would be fine in a week. The main thing is not to overexert himself. The healer said the boy is truly blessed. He must have figured it out by now. Deso said yes, that's right. And now Deso realized what that feeling was. As he honed the 3 basic techniques, and the healer turned around and said in that case, he was off. The girls cheered and shouted that it was happiness for them. Deso simply left the room and said he would be back soon. He realized that the original plan had failed, so he needed to come up with an idea. But to do that, it would be nice to figure out how things work around here. Except he's not stressing out here. No wonder everyone here is such a hard worker. After all, strength means power. And unlike other clans, Namgung is divided into 8 battle corps that determine its position in the clan. It was father's wish. He was always against unnecessary complexity. But strength is more important than anything else. The head always said that whoever is strongest is right. But Deso doesn't care. He's going to get out of here anyway. And suddenly he was in front of the training hall and said there was no better place to think through his elaborate plan. In a week's time, he'll have to be here every day. He'll remember the humiliation he's suffered. But tonight, he's on a secret mission. And he's just going to look around for a while. But suddenly he was shocked, because the place was empty, and he thought, where's everybody gone? You can train here in your free time, so why is there no one here? Suddenly 2 guys came through the door, but Deso decided not to show himself and hid behind the board. While the guys were discussing their adventures, the apprentice said that the abilities of the Clear Sky Squad are amazing, and the fancy lunges and the brilliance of the sword cutting through the air. And now Deso realized that they were on a field trip. But one of the students asked if they had heard. They say that starting next week, a young lord will be joining them. And there's also a rumor that the clan head personally picked him up from the ceremony. They also say he failed all the tests. He has no strength, no agility, no qi. But they'll know when they see him. Haven't they heard the legend? The guys asked, what was it? The guy said 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and 369 days. The guys said of course they've heard it. It's about the direct descendants of the clan. But still, you shouldn't always believe rumors. Deso thought it was, how much he had suffered because of her. And that's how long it took for the brothers to finish their training in the training hall. All disciples of the Namgung clan, regardless of whether they are direct descendants or not, must train in the training hall. Only after that will they be officially accepted as a disciple. Normally, they would have to pass an annual assessment to be accepted, or simply defeat all the cadets in a sparring, endless battle. He still remembers that the first brother took 30 days, the second took 60, and the third 90. But in reality, it's not that simple. It's sheer madness, everyone in the training room. Incredibly talented fighters who are unrivaled outside the clan. One of the students started to say that he fell asleep last night while practicing his rider stance. But another disciple was surprised and said that it was the guy's diligence. He had only made a few tens of thousands of sword swings. But another student came up to them and said they were idiots. This way, they would never reach the top of the pure Sky Squad. After all, he had made 100,000 sword swings in the horseman's stance. Deso looked at them from the side and said that they had muscles instead of brains. And he took it, they'd failed the assessment and stayed another year. And now he has that familiar feeling. He doesn't have to worry about them. He's got his own problems to worry about. He immediately decided to get the hell out of there. But he realized that he'd been preparing to carry out his plan for 10 years, and he could wait another year. But his plans were thwarted by the divine physician. He didn't even think it could be like this. But those were just flowers. But let them wait for him at his annual appraisal. They would see his crushing failure. After a week, Deso could see that his chi energy was increasing, albeit gradually. But at this rate, he would need to train 3 hours a day for 100 years before he would have as much chi as he should have at the age of 30. And it's not even surprising why the 3 Basic Fencing Techniques is a third-rate book. But what does he care what other people think? If he likes it, why not train? He was dragged into the training hall without even waiting for a week to pass. But he looked at the doors and said that soon the others would come too. But suddenly the door opened, and he was greatly surprised. The second strategist, Namgung Chechon, asked Deso if he had recovered yet. They never met after the ceremony, right? Deso replied to Chechon that he was happy to meet him. By the age of 5, he knew the great teachings by heart. But everyone and such a great man honored him with a visit. Chechon asked the lad if anything was hurting him. Deso answered him not to worry Chechon. But Chechon asked him to leave the formalities behind, and he might be the second strategist of the clan, and he doesn't hold any position yet. But still, unlike him, he is a direct descendant. Their communication should flow in a different direction. Deso hadn't really figured out how to address him, so he asked Chechon if he could speak to him as an equal. The guy replied that of course he could. Deso asked him directly who sent him. Chechon replied that of course he did, the chief strategist. And then Deso realized that the guy is referring to Master Poet Namgung Il Lo. And Master Poet stands apart from all the factions of the clan. So why did he send a second strategist? Deso grabbed his head and realized that his head was about to explode. And it wouldn't do to strain his meanderings like that during a small conversation. Deso asked the guy, was he the one here for his ceremony? Chechon replied that, absolutely right. But the direct descendants of the clan shine much brighter than the rest of the scum. Deso was surprised and asked, the awful? Chechon lay down for the ground and replied, that's why he chose the Namgung clan. Deso asked him if he was serious. The guy said yes, so he doesn't have to explain everything 10 times to idiots. He also agrees that it's possible to be understood the first time, right? He has a lot of work to do, but since he was sent here by the chief strategist himself, whom he deeply respects, he came, even though he feels like sticking his hands in a hot pot. But he's like a ray of sunshine to these dumb muscleheads. Deso noticed that there was clearly something wrong with him. Chechon asked the boy if he would let him ask him a question. Deso asked what kind. The boy didn't expect that, and asked him, did he want to conquer the world of martial arts with him? And to tell the truth, he only came to the clan to ruin it from within. Deso immediately realized that this guy was crazy. And it's understandable why everyone thinks he's crazy. He asked the guy if he had asked his brothers about this too. Chechon replied that of course he had. The older one said he could do it without him. Another replied, that's why bookworms are useless nobodies. And a third called him a lunatic altogether. Deso realized that everyone was right in their own way. Chechon asked the boy what he would say. One should always dream bigger, right? Deso asked him if he had a plan. The boy replied that no, he doesn't see any loopholes, and hate to admit it, but the Namgung clan is perfect. Deso turned around and bluntly said there was nothing to hold him up. He'd be late for the ceremony that way. And enough of this nonsense, it's time to go. Chechon started to get indignant and yelled that he wanted an answer. Deso told him to do what he wanted, and he didn't give a damn about the clan. Chechion was surprised and froze in place, but Deso started yelling at him and told him they were late. Chechion abruptly got up and started walking, but Deso stopped him and told him that they were not going that way, they were going the other way. But along the way, Chechion resented him and kept saying that this was a stupid clan, vile, insignificant, and full of only idiots. But then Deso punched the guy and asked what's wrong with him, why is he not talking? Chechion said he was honored to meet the future members of the Namgung clan, and they have a second strategist in front of them right now. Deso immediately saw them tense up when they realized he was above them in status. But if they talked to him longer, they would realize that he was just crazy. But Chechion decided to act differently and told them to greet the junior lord of the Namgung clan, and from today, he would train with them. Deso felt bad that they were staring at him, and he thinks that after a couple of days they'll be deeply disappointed in him. But Chechion said that whoever leads this pathetic clan full of idiots, the disciples were just out of their minds and didn't understand why he was calling them all that. Deso asked him what he was saying. Chechion said to let them introduce their future lord, but Deso just lost his temper and punched him and yelled at him to shut up. And has he really lost his mind? The blow was so strong that Chechion fell to the ground like a sack, but Deso caught him and told them to ignore him, let them keep practicing. After that, Deso brought him to the healing center. The healer came out and said that here they were meeting again. Deso was surprised and asked the healer, "Is he still here?" The healer examined the guy and replied that he was unconscious, not a bit of surprise on his face, and it looks like he was ambushed or attacked by someone familiar. And judging from the fact that his right arm was slightly swollen, that was the one who hit him. Deso laughed and replied that he wouldn't expect anything less from a divine healer. The healer asked the boy if he could repeat his question. Deso replied that he asked how long he planned to stay here. The healer thought and replied that he was fed and had a place to sleep. Oh, and there is entertainment. Deso immediately left the room and said he had to go. The healer let him go and said goodbye. But Deso thought it was very strange, and he's sure, in his past life he never stayed here for so long, and maybe the future had changed? But there was no difference in that. He won't be interfering with his plans this time, and now he just needed to focus on the goal. That same night, Chechion regained consciousness and jumped out of bed. The healer asked him how he felt. Chechion replied that this was the first time this had happened to him. The healer was surprised and asked how the first time. Chechion replied that an abnormality had appeared in him. The healer said he hadn't noticed anything like that, but Chechion replied that he had seen a light that could change this clan of dumbasses. The healer decided to enlighten him and said that the anomaly was only in his head. But Chechion said that his long-held dream had come true. The healer asked the guy with the look in his eyes, "Does he know who's in front of him?" Chechion replied, "How could he not know?" And he apologized to him for such a late greeting. And after introducing himself, said that he holds the humble position of second strategist. The healer was surprised and told the lad that he means he is the lunatic Namgung Il Lo was talking about. And in his eyes, he sees a deep understanding, and he can't be called ordinary. Han Chul has always attracted talented people to him. And is his son doing the same thing? Jaechun said goodbye and said he had a lot of things to do. And he may not be able to tell, but without him the place would fall apart, and shouted to the master to just wait, and if they put their plans together, they would succeed. The healer Deso looked around and said that everyone had already started their individual training. There are no teachers here. All methods are allowed, and their future depends on their grades, so they have to work hard. Deso stepped aside and said he would start too. But that didn't stop Deso, and he decided to let them stare at him all they wanted. As he practiced, he cheered and said that's what he wanted. The students were surprised and asked, "Is that 3 basic techniques?" But another student replied that he was waiting so much, but he doesn't even know the basics. Deso realized that if they saw him repeating only 3 basic techniques all the time, they would immediately realize that he was good for nothing. And at the annual evaluation, he would prove it to them once again. He's a worthless piece of garbage. And he was afraid that because of this abnormal person, all his plans would go down the drain again. But it looked like nothing was going to stop him. On the way home, he hummed a song and said he had had a busy day. But upon entering his house, he said he was back, and it was time to eat. But he was shocked by what he saw. Chechion had already met him and asked him why he was standing like a pillar. Let him come to the table sooner. But during the head's talks, the chief strategist of the Namgung clan, Illuo, was present. The healer was outraged and asked Illo, did he know everything? That this sick in the head wanted to destroy their clan. Illo started laughing and replied that the second strategist was a very unusual person. However, no one else could handle this much work but him, and they should know that if anyone could replace him as chief strategist, it would be him. The healer replied that he understands that he's good and all, but he's dangerous. Han Chul, did he know about everything too? Il answered him not to worry. He's a nice kid at heart. High intelligence is a real curse, and everything always went just as he predicted. Every day the boredom got the better of him. Just when he thought he was going crazy, Namgung Biguan and Namgung Han Chul appeared, and he saw the light again. The second strategist was just as bored, but at last he got rid of it too. He discovered fun. Deso was still indignant and asked the boy why he was attached to him. After all, he had understandably let it be known that he wanted to leave the clan. Chechon replied that he hates that idiot clan too. The enemy of his enemy is just a friend, right? Deso said he doesn't hate from the clan. Chechon was surprised and asked what does that mean? Didn't he say he wanted to break out of here to crush this world? Deso replied that he was sick. When has he ever said that? He actually loves the Namgung clan, but getting stabbed with a sword isn't something he really likes. Jaecheon asked the Lord why he was trying to escape. Deso realized he had to choose his words carefully, and, for one thing, would find out what he was up to, and asked the lad what he himself was trying to accomplish. Chechon replied that he wished to destroy the world, but Deso said he was against it. The guy didn't stop and asked, maybe the Namgung clan then, or maybe overthrow the god of martial arts. But Deso denied everything and disagreed. The guy Chechion prepared himself and told the Lord that he was waiting for orders. One word from him, and he will wipe the Shaolin temple off the face of the earth. Deso was surprised and asked the guy when did he become his lord. Chechon replied that he had already made up his mind. Deso denied everything and said he doesn't want to and told him to stop. After all, he wants a quiet and peaceful life. Or does he want to overthrow the Namgung clan? And it's better to stick with his big brother. Chechon replied that the Lord is still a dormant dragon, and says, is it too early to act? Deso replied that no, he's totally serious. He wants to live somewhere in the mountains near clean water and cultivate fields. Chechon said that the good mountains are the Shaolin, Wudang, and Huashan, and there is clean water in the Yangtze and Huanghe rivers, and they must have decided to capture them all, and he wouldn't expect anything less from the Lord. They will take over both the land and the waters at the same time. But Deso stopped him and told him to wait a year. Chechion asked, will they start acting then? They could conquer the world. Deso understood and wanted to stop things as they were, and in a year, he would realize that he wasn't living up to his expectations. A couple months later, Deso was still practicing and showing the guys his 3 techniques. An apprentice watched and asked, Mr. What, does he still do nothing? And it looks like he doesn't know anything besides these techniques. It's also a pathetic sight. That's why he was nicknamed the base retard. Deso heard everything and thought it was great. He was well on his way to becoming a scumbag. But Deso said in a strange way, the chi that was formed because of his daily training was slowly spreading throughout his body. And of course, it's still not enough. But that doesn't matter. But suddenly, Chechon came in and addressed the master. The lad asked, how was the training? The ladies had prepared a dish that was sure to be to his liking. Deso agreed and saw that he wasn't so bad, calling him a lord, even though the rest of them are basic retards. Deso started to leave and said he was just getting hungry, and it's time to go sooner rather than later. But Chechon decided to use his skills, and just looking at the rest of the students let a shiver run down their bodies. The disciples just got scared and stepped aside. But Deso got tired of waiting for him and told him to catch up faster. But Chechon had prepared something of his own, and opening the box told the master to try it. Deso asked, and what was the poison this time? The guy replied that they were small battle pills. Deso ate some and asked the guy where did he get them from. The guy replied that the head monk of the Shaolin temple gave them to the clan. Next, he went to the ladies and decided to give them a treat too. Deso at this point hoped he hadn't stolen them, but he suddenly felt chi spreading through his body again. But that didn't matter. Martial arts weren't for him anyway. Chechen looked at the Lord at this moment and saw that he had sensed everything, but he didn't even show it. Deso walked out of the house and saw that the street was full of people. Chechon said that it looks like everyone is preparing for tomorrow's appraisal. Is it okay? The guy said immediately that he wasn't expecting anything less. And finally the time had come when they would destroy the Namgung clan. But Deso actually realized that he would only destroy his dreams. Because he only practiced the 3 basic swordsmanship techniques, he was nicknamed the Basic Retard. And it's time for the fall of the martial arts god. They would just conquer the whole world. Deso allowed him to blabber all he wanted. And today, he will lose every battle. The students were all ready for the competition by now. Deso noticed that everyone was very nervous, but he didn't care. He was still determined to fail miserably. But then there was a loud voice that told them to come in. The students all walked over to the competition, and Deso was shocked to see his father standing on the podium. Also sitting there were his brothers, and even the chief strategist. And here he thought something had gone wrong for him. There were fewer people here last time, but Chechon decided to do something different, and made a flag with a picture of the Lord on it, and shouted that he wished him luck. And then he started saying that they're going to revolutionize the Namgung clan, and he is their light, the dreams and hopes of the clan. Deso just blushed at such a scary and loud voice, but the judge came out and told everyone to be quiet. After all, they would be judging purely on their abilities. No other external factors would be taken into consideration. And if they're all no good at anything, no one will move on. On the other hand, if they all perform at the right level, they'll all pass. And there are 2 ways to pass the certification. First, to challenge someone in particular to a fight. And if they are different, and themselves can choose the corps they want to go to. However, they will only have 1 chance. And if they fail, they will stay another year. And secondly, they can enter the arena to have 5 fights. They will be judged on their technique, not the result of the fights. And by challenging someone to a fight, they can better showcase their abilities. However, if they fail, they may not get into the corps they wanted. Let them choose their opponent wisely. And now that they were done with the introductory part, then they could begin the competition. Here came out the first student and said that he was challenging the deputy captain of the Pure Sky squad, Namgung Chi Yel, to a fight. Yel got excited and replied that it was perfect. He immediately jumped straight into the arena. Yel said that he had a familiar face and what was his name? The guy replied that his name was Namgung Huang. Yale was surprised and asked, Namgung Huang. He immediately realized that he was the master of the Pure Sky squad, and they say he personally put down 100 opponents in one battle. Il asked his opponent. He had challenged him last year, right? And he didn't last 5 seconds as he remembers. And he likes his tenacity, and if he lasts 10 seconds, and he'll accept him into his squad. Huang got excited and asked, Really? Yale replied that yes, he would. But don't let him think it will be easy. Those seconds would seem like an eternity to him. Yale didn't even waste any time, and immediately went on the attack. But Huang stopped him that very second. Yale told the guy that he knew the basics. All the students were also surprised that this guy was able to withstand the deputy captain's punch. But Deso was surprised too, and he thought it was weird. Yale didn't stop, and said that he was about to see if he could resist after that. But Huang saw the huge sword in front of him and realized that he needed to act right now. The disciple asked, Did he raise the sword? At a moment like this? But the others said it was a failure again. But Yale wasn't bad either, and applied his strike against the opponent's sword. During the strike, the opponent's sword simply broke into 2 pieces. He didn't think he would see such a stance from Huang. Yale told the guy that he passed. Huang got excited and replied that he would give it his best, but Yale showed that with the proper effort, he could be molded into the strongest swordsman in the world. The other elders were saying at this moment that he was an outstanding talent. And here was to win him over to their side. But the disciples were indignant and asked, what should they do after such a start? They were just not doing well. Deso also noticed that this opponent was incredible. But why did they have to put so much effort into the block? And if the guy had done as well as he needed to, he was sure he would have done just as well. The referee turned to the rest of the students and told the next one to step forward. But the students were so scared that they all just turned their heads to the side to show they disagreed. The old man decided to do otherwise and said that since there were no willing students, he would choose one himself. But then Deso decided to try his chance and raised his hand. He was so happy that he even said he would go. Chechen, hearing this, rejoiced and shouted that at last his lord had begun, and let him show everyone what he could do. But Deso decided to act differently, and with every strike of his opponent he lost his sword from his hands. Eventually, his opponent simply knocked the sword out of his hands and struck him right on the head. Deso fell to the ground with a smile on his face and said that he had lost again. Chechen just lost his temper after something like that and asked the Lord what was he doing. But Deso didn't get upset and just waved at the second strategist and asked him if he could teach him literacy, and in his opinion, martial arts were not his. Chechen didn't understand him and asked him what he was talking about. Deso decided to speak up and started saying that he was surprised to see so much talent in the clan, and it looks like his rival just has a bright future ahead of him. The head at this moment looked at his son and did not understand what he was trying to do. The audience had already started discussing him and saying that this guy was good for nothing, so he was nicknamed the base retard for a reason. But Chechen heard all this and turned around and told the guy that his eyes were just good for nothing, and if they didn't want to be known as fools, they'd better sit down and keep quiet. And how dare they even say such a thing in his presence? Chechen just couldn't take such insults and flew at them with his fists, and Deso decided that the show was a success. And now it was just a matter of waiting for him to be thrown out of the arena. But then the head decided to speak his mind and said that it was too boring. But his voice was filled with strong energy that the others even felt it. The head asked the others if they agreed. The audience simply couldn't answer differently and agreed with him on everything. Deso also felt his father's power. The head said right away that the current youth were not capable of anything. No fun at all. And they still call themselves the strongest clan? Chechen decided to say that the Lord was right too, and said he had an idea. Deso was just horrified and didn't realize what this lunatic was doing. The head asked him what his idea was. Chechen suggested that they should have a duel between direct descendants. Hearing such a suggestion, Deso was just shocked, and his whole plan just fell apart, and said that they would ruin his Dantian again. The head asked Seo what he would say about this. Would he fight his little brother? Seo asked his father if he was serious. The head replied that of course, but no one is forcing him, and further turned to Jun and asked him how he sees it. Seo decided not to give the second brother a chance and jumped into the arena and said he would go, and there was no point in getting the older brothers involved. The head told Deso that it was settled, but the younger one asked if he could refuse. The head replied that of course, but if he doesn't want to, just let him give up. Deso was surprised at such favors and asked if it was true. His father answered him that yes, but then he would lose his status and one arm, and told So that, given the difference in strength, let him not use chi. Deso didn't understand at that moment. How did it turn out like that? And said that it was all because of that crazy guy. Chechen just shouted to the Lord that he had come up with a worthy scene, and just let him have his fun. But actually the guy knew that day he had given him a considerable pill, and a big one at that. One that contained as much chi energy as one could generate in a few decades. And with that, no other change in the body will occur, and he only knows one like him, and that's the head of the Namgun clan. He too possesses a divine physique. Chechen shouted to the Lord that today he will show what he can do. Standing up against each other, Seo said that not only had they never fought once, but they had never even spoken once. Deso replied to his brother that that's just the way it is, and prayed that it would end in one blow. So immediately launched into his attacks and said that he definitely wouldn't hold back. Deso didn't even have time to blink before his brother was in front of him, and all he had to do was scream. And after such an attack, suddenly everything around them exploded. But Deso managed to dodge the impact and jumped out of the way, saving his life from death. After that, Seo turned to him and told his brother that he was acting like a pathetic coward. Deso mentally sent him far away and realized that if he didn't dodge, he would have died. Seo said he had already noticed. Martial arts were of no interest to him, to say the least. Deso cheered and yelled that at least someone realized that, and suggested to his brother that they shake hands and part ways. Seo answered him that maybe today was the last time they could cross swords. Let him show himself to be a man, so that his brother would remember him as a decent man. Seo didn't waste his time again, and immediately swung his sword attack at him. But Deso saw the wooden sword in front of him and felt that he would not be able to dodge it in time, and decided that he too would have to respond, and if it penetrated his weak points, it could relieve the pressure from the blow, and applied basics of the sword art, heavenly form. Deso simply struck at every point on his brother's body, and at the last moment, he simply stopped his brother's attack with his sword. But he felt like he was in pain, like he was being pressed down by a boulder, and he said loudly that he could handle it. And with a sideways dodge, he knocked his brother down. Everyone was just shocked to see him fight like that, and Chechon was just shouting with joy. Seo asked Deso what was that. The kid replied that he just blocked the punch. Everyone was already discussing, and couldn't believe that the younger lord was able to block that lunge. But how was that possible, they wondered. After all, the third lord's punch art was capable of breaking through any defense. Even dodging was useless. The slashing strike would reach anyone, and the junior lord simply repelled such a strike with the simplest sword art. Deso was surprised and didn't understand what they were talking about. After all, he had actually just blocked it. Seo was furious and said that if it wasn't a fluke, he could do it again. Deso noticed that his brother kept repeating that punch, and he had no choice. Deso decided that he had applied the 3 basics of the sword art. The human form, from the concentration of his body, he touched his sword to his brother's elbow first, then moved to his wrist and ankles, and immediately raising his sword to the sky, he stopped his brother's attack. But Seo felt that he couldn't attack with all his might, and the younger man hits specific points as if he knows where he draws his strength from, and then blocks the weakened blows. But that can't be. How does this weakling fight so skillfully, thought Seo. But Deso didn't stop there, and used the same technique again. Seo felt that his brother would block his punch again, but at the last moment, Seo just threw a punch and Deso let go of the sword from his hands, making it look like it was his brother's attack. Deso fell to the ground and said, "He lost." Chechon asked what was that. The onlookers had already said that it was obvious. The younger master was only holding on because the third master didn't use chi. Deso started laughing and said that martial arts weren't his, and he would go from here already and start a quiet life. But Seo suddenly told him to stop, for Junior had dared to give in to him to get out of here, and thought he wouldn't notice. Deso was angry, and wished his brother would just let him go already. And he doesn't understand. Does his brother want to kill him? Seo turned to his father and said that he's asking for a rematch, and asks him to let him fight again. With real swords. The head smiled and told Deso that this was his brother's request. Deso replied that he had lost after all, and he's not even strong enough. He can't even hold a sword. The spectator said that the younger man had lost. One more battle wouldn't change anything. Seo just got angry after that and asked Junior if he thought a fake victory would satisfy him. Let him raise his sword, and if he just keeps showing off, he can consider him no longer his brother, but his enemy. And his enemies are not to be envied. He'll never have a quiet life again. Deso didn't know what was wrong with his brother. After all, he had already admitted defeat. Il looked at all this and said there was something wrong. The head's eldest son said he thought nothing bad would happen if they fought again, but properly. Deso thought they just wouldn't rest until he lost his arm. And then the head said he'd better finish what he started, and he's giving him permission to get a rematch. And if Deso doesn't want to fight, let him put up his hands like they agreed. Again, because of the difference in strength, he'll impose restrictions. Swords can only be crossed once. The head asked his son what he would do with the chi. Seo replied that 30% would be enough for him, but Deso was surprised and asked, "Doesn't anyone care about his opinion?" The head asked, "So is he going to fight with a wooden sword? He will not discourage him." Deso answered his father that he didn't need to, and thought they were just a clan of fanatics. Seo immediately told his youngest that if he decided to throw anything else out, he would cut off both of his hands. Everyone just started laughing after saying that. Deso realized that he had never concentrated like that before, and can't see or hear anything or anyone but his brother. Seo immediately told Deso that he was starting, and jumped into the sky and unleashed a devastating iron strike. Deso noticed immediately that the swing wasn't that fast, but he can't dodge. Deso said that if he didn't want to lose his arm, he had to act, and he used 3 basic techniques, ground forms. But Seo was already a little more attentive, and told his brother that he could see, and dodged Junior's attack by jumping into the sky. Seo decided to attack him from the air and said he wouldn't fall for the same trick twice. Deso is a little confused and asks, what should he do then? It's not like he doesn't know anything else, but without falling down, he applied the 3 basic techniques and realized that even his brother wouldn't be able to dodge in the air. But things turned out so that Seo shouted that there was no chance, but there was blood being spilled. Suddenly, Seo turned around and was shocked because he didn't realize where his brother had gone. At that moment, Deso used the heavenly form of the perfect sword lord technique, and then Seo immediately retaliated with a devastating iron strike. The energy was so strong that the spectators even turned their eyes closed. Chechun watched too, and hoped that the Lord would put in a little more strength. After all, he had almost succeeded. Deso held on with his last strength and felt the force of the blow. He remembered at once that he had lost his dantian in his past life. And would he still get his arm chopped off? Deso got angry and promised himself that they would never do that. And his energy began to fully increase and slowly suppress Seo. Everyone just looked at this sight and couldn't believe such a thing. The healer was also saying he couldn't believe his eyes. And maybe his body was a wasteland. The tangled meridians had dried up the soil. But now the 3 basic techniques had irrigated it like a gentle rain, and flowers sprouted in the wasteland. Deso believed in himself and shouted that he could do it, but Seo already felt that he couldn't cope with such a powerful energy, so he decided not to back down and prove that he was stronger. This time, Seo was not wrong for not backing down, and Deso just froze for a second and was wounded by his brother's sword. The blood had already been spilled, and the judge immediately shouted that Namgung-so had won. The healers immediately jumped into the ring and examined Junior, saying that the wound was deep and he needed acupuncture immediately. Jae-chun was also surprised at this outcome, but the healer walking beside him saw something strange about him, for he didn't even move, and it wasn't like him, and realized that he was definitely not at home. The boys came up to him and told him that the young gentleman was in serious condition. He would take the healer to him. But suddenly Seo raised his hand and just let go on his sword, breaking it in 2 and cutting his own arm. Everyone was shocked. But Seo said that because of Deso's surprise attack, he didn't use 30% chi, but 50%. And it's not Deso who should be bleeding now, but him, and he will admit his defeat against his younger brother. After the arena, Deso was brought to the ward, and in the morning he opened his eyes and looked around asking, "Is he at the healer's?" As he stood up, he immediately grabbed his chest as the pain just began to squeeze him. He remembered his brother hitting him, but he was still happy. After all, both of his arms are still in place. Chechion told him to lie down and take it easy, or the wound would reopen. Deso saw him and started cursing and saying that he had almost killed him because of him. Chechon started laughing and apologized to him. Still, the Lord won his first victory. Deso was in shock and couldn't believe that he had won. And then the physician came in and said that judging by his cheerful voice, which could be heard even from the street, he had plenty of strength. Deso asked the Lakar to explain what kind of nonsense this lunatic was talking about. The healer told him that he was the one who won the duel, and after the defeat, Namgung-so announced that he had decided to go into seclusion, and said he would return in 3 years. Deso looked at his hands and asked, "Did he really win?" Chechion replied that the clan head had decided to reward him for that as well. The boy was incredibly shocked as he heard that his father had given him a gift. When he opened the gift, he asked what it was. When he opened the gift, he saw that he had a 3-day admission to the archive of 10,000 books. Deso was so happy that he shouted that it was a pass allowing him to enter the archive, where more than 10,000 books are kept. And there are some real masterpieces in there, and not all of them have been found. and many who have entered the archive have returned, having mastered martial arts on a completely different level. Chechon replied that that was correct. There is some completely useless reading in there as well, but be that as it may, the archive is a veritable treasure trove of martial arts knowledge. But suddenly Deso said he wasn't going. Chechon was shocked and asked what he was talking about. A lot of people would kill to go there and he refuses? Deso asked if he forgot what his dream was. Chechon replied that yes, to live in a hole like a mouse and pretend to be dead when he sees a cat. For the rest of his life, to hide in the shadows and shiver in fear. Deso turned around and asked him, "Is he pouncing? Let him start watching his words a little." But Deso asked him right away to stop comparing him to a mouse. But Sicheon said that because of the last fight, the whole world knew about him, and he would never live a peaceful life again. And he kind of wanted to leave the clan? But he has a way for him to do that. In fact, to survive in the tiger's den, you have to either kill all the tigers or lead them. So where will they start? Maybe they will slowly build up his influence? What would he say to such a suggestion? Deso was just furious, and grabbing the guy by his clothes asked if he was done. Chechon just didn't understand at first. But the master said it was time to punch him then. The healer left the two of them alone. I could only hear Chechon screaming as he asked the Lord to stop. After the beaten face, Chechon sat down on the couch and said that he had apologized. But Deso realized that all his efforts were for naught, and it seems he had no choice. Before he escaped from this clan of fanatics, he would have to learn martial arts to survive. Deso said that if it came to that, so be it, and they'll see who they pierce with a sword this time. Chechon told the Lord that his life will change from tomorrow. Deso asked in what way. The lad replied that people will want to join them, but there will also be those who will only pretend to want to join in order to keep an eye on him. It would be like the Lord would be at the center of the universe, but if he didn't have enough power, he would be turned into a puppet. And everyone will only think about lining their pockets at his expense. That's why he has to get stronger. And that's how he'll protect himself and not let himself be manipulated. His dream can't be realized without strength. Deso thought that a life where he is weak and no one cares about him, he knows it. And the fate of the weak is unenviable. He'd be wounded, kicked out of the clan, and then killed by a bandit. Suddenly, he remembered that a lot of things had changed in his past life. And so had he. What if this time he was allowed to compete? Both brothers had lost to the older one, but they had gotten nothing for it. They just left to follow their ideals. Because of the fact that their skills and abilities were enough to stand up to the elder. They, though they lost, earned the clan's recognition. Deso decided and said that they would get serious about preparing for the competition. And afterward, he could do whatever he wanted. Become a farmer, or a merchant, or maybe just wander around. But you have to get to the level of your big brother. So before the competition, he has to become a grandmaster at least. Chechon replied to the Lord that they have a maximum of 3 years while Namguung Seo trains in seclusion. In that time, they need to lay a solid foundation and prepare for a counterattack. Deso immediately decided to start training and said that they should get going. Chechon was surprised and asked where to. Deso turned around and asked him back, himself, what does he think? Of course, they need to go to the archives. Deso stood in front of the doors of the archive of 10,000 books and said that the knowledge of the future was the most important thing here, and they just needed to find the book. The older brother became a master after he went to the archives. This art was used in the Udon sect along with the Tai-Chi swordsmanship technique and the infinite strike technique. He had achieved everything through these martial arts. Chechon told the master that while he was in the archives, he would definitely keep an eye on the ladies, and for a while, Master Day and Master June would be inactive. The problem is Seo's followers, and because of Master from the three has disintegrated. While Seo is practicing in seclusion, Day and June can try to undermine his influence, but the Emperor's family has asked for help. If they send Seo's followers to the palace, no one can touch them. As long as he's in isolation, their clan won't be touched, so they're fine with it. Left alone, Day and June will start to compete, but each of them will delay the first step. And since the master has decided to go into the archives, he needs to make the most of it. Otherwise, his enemies will try to take advantage of him. Deso had told him that he knew everything, and there was no need to worry. He already had a plan. Showing the invitation, the guardian simply opened the doors for him and allowed him to enter. And Chechon wished him good luck. At that moment, there were already people standing behind the bushes watching him, and when they saw him go inside, they immediately vaporized. Chechon said that of course the Lord didn't know, but until that day he had never once gotten into a battle that he could lose, and the faction war would begin. But in the meantime, they will make preparations. Lord, I'm sure those who have been following them have been hiding at the archives, and are reporting back to their leaders by now. A scout came to the head and told him that the young lord had entered the archives, and that is why Lord Deso really needs him now. And it was time for him to get into action already too. Deso went inside, and was shocked to see that there were so many books, and thought it was all secret tech. Deso picked up one of the books and wondered how much money he would make if he stole and sold a couple, but decided to pull himself together and said he wasn't here for money. In a past life, his brother had told him, since they were so interested, he'd tell them what he'd studied in the archives. And on the farthest shelf, he found a secret technique. Deso noticed it and thought, is this it? He took it in his hands and wiped it clean of dust. And after reading it, he said that this was the technique Brother Day was talking about. Day had said earlier that he had left it in the archives. He thinks they can learn it too. We just have to try. It allows you to split your will in two to use two martial arts at the same time. The art of yin-yang. It can be considered one of the greatest techniques of all time. But just splitting your will is not enough. Almost every clan member who has studied the art of yin-yang can do it. And to confront his brother, one must find the same thing that he found. And will find out what it was, no matter what it costs him. At this time, at Jun Namgung's residence, he received information that Deso had entered the archives, and now he knows exactly what his brother is looking for. It's a book on the art of yin-yang. And he wondered, what would his brother need this pathetic technique for? Most know second young master Namgung Jun as a scholar or a young warrior, but to his closest supporters he is known as a schemer. Jun told the servant to keep watching the younger man, and tell him to be careful of the psycho. But yin-yang arts are just a circus compared to true strength. Using two martial arts at the same time is very handy in a situation where you need to stab in the back and escape. But in order to develop something worthy from this technique, he must travel far away. And of this, the younger one can't help but know. But the first brother was special from birth. Junior is special in a slightly different way. Gifted people are usually compared to each other. The brighter their talent shines, the more people will follow them. But if someone is too different, it's easy for them to become outcasts. And the second strategist, Namgung Chechon, although he's not lacking in intelligence, he's treated like a lunatic. And of the special personalities, these are the most dangerous. Based on his own motives, this mad dog began to act, and all for the sake of the younger one. And during the fight, Junior surprised him. But that's only natural for Namgung's future successor. Why was this psycho looking for a meeting with Junior? Jun thought, and ordered them to place 5 masters of exceptionally rank and above in the 10,000 books archive, and 5 warriors in the war pavilion. And every hour he should report the situation. The servant asked, "Isn't that excessive?" Jun looked at him with his gaze and asked, "And in his opinion, is it excessive?" But even that army following the third would not be enough. The servant said that it would be executed immediately. But Jun said that if someone saw a dragon for the first time, they would hardly distinguish it from a snake or a worm. However, he was growing up in the shadow of a huge dragon. In baby form, dragon, snake, and worm are all the same. What he really is will be revealed in 3 days. But is he a true dragon or a pathetic worm? Deso was reading a book at this moment and didn't understand what it said. He just got angry and shouted that it was bullshit. And why is it so hard? Deso was just shocked at how complicated it was. And he doesn't think it's a martial art at all. But why shove all that stuff into martial techniques? But the spirit that was inside the book was trying to tell him that it was a very valuable book. But Deso heard nothing, and said that here were the teachings of the 3 basic swordsmanship techniques were accessibly written. Deso decided that in the beginning there was a microcosm, and this microcosm gave birth to chaos. In this chaos, order was established, and a world called infinity appeared, and immediately turned into a higher beginning. One part absorbed the energy of the sky and became yang. The other absorbed the energy of the earth and became yin, and they were called yin and yang. Deso read everything thoroughly and said he understood everything. Deso said that in any case, again, wudang is the higher beginning from which yin and yang were formed. The energy is split in two. One stream circulates here and the other there. This is called the art of yin and yang. Deso was surprised that he was a genius. The spirit was watching him and said that this guy is good, and since he was able to get this far. A child who has learned duality, the way the whole world will fall at his feet. Deso started to misunderstand and said it was nonsense. He threw the book away and decided he'd had enough of the theory. The spirit was angry and began to curse him for treating Wudang's secret teachings so badly. But Deso decided that he would try it out. And thanks to the teachings of the 3 basic swordsmanship techniques in general, he managed to accumulate a handful of inner strength. And for starters, utilizes the great breathing technique. Deso used the technique and was surprised that the inner strength always circulated at such a speed. And if you stopped it from being carried, it would rupture the meridians. He began to remember. How long did a full cycle take? And remembered at least an hour. Deso turned his head to the side and thought he'd made a mistake somewhere, and would concentrate on what he had already started first, and will spice up the already existing breathing technique with the art of yin-yang, and decided to start by separating yin and yang. He was shocked that it worked the first time, and now he was convinced he was a genius. But as he stood up, he felt he couldn't move, and his feet just froze. But the rest of his body was burning with heat. He didn't understand why this was happening. Deso had said that his head was on fire on top, about to sinter, but his feet were so cold underneath, as if they were already frostbitten. He was frightened, for this was not the way they had agreed with the technique, and he begged Yin-Yang to stop doing that. But things didn't go according to plan, and the yin and yang energy just started eating him up. And Deso was screaming that he was wrong. The spirit let him feel it with every bone in his body. Impudent boys like him shouldn't open their mouths to someone else's. Deso was lying on the floor saying he shouldn't have gotten involved in those martial arts. He just wanted a happy life, and now the heat's making his mind swim. He was even starting to see strange things. Deso stood up and wondered where he would go if he died again. And the spirit was also shocked that the guy could mix 2 opposite energies, and now he should be praised for his bravery. But did he really even think he could come out of something like this dry? Suddenly, something had happened to Deso, and the energy just overwhelmed him. At this time in the chapter pavilion, he was telling Li Han that he was a warrior. In fact, he knew what the higher ground was. The healer asked, "Is it that thing that the Wudang lousy guys are always yammering about?" The head replied, "That's right. And they don't know anything about the higher beginning, but they act like they are the most enlightened." The healer asked, "What is it?" The head replied that the supreme beginning personified yin and yang. The yang energy became the sky, and the yin energy became the earth. So heaven and earth came into being, and when they came into contact again, all things were born, the 4 and 5 elements, the 8 trigrams and other new disciplines like the 64 hexagrams. The healer said he was divine, and how could he not know that? The head replied that there was one most important point missing here, and man. It was man who balanced everything. Deso came to his senses and asked what was the matter, and where had the pain gone. His body had failed after all and had lost sensitivity, but things were still raging inside him. The spirit was shocked because the guy had mastered the 4 elements. But that only happens after fully understanding yin-yang and their intertwining. How did an ignorant guy even manage to do that? But still his elements were increasing, and Spirit was shocked again that he already had 5 of them. Deso felt a pain inside him, and saw that everything inside his body had a life of its own. Spirit said that this is just unheard of. He doesn't even know anything, just watching the body put everything in order. And how can there be such an irrational way of mastering the art of yin and yang? But whether alive or dead, this is the first time he's encountered such nonsense. Deso noticed a couple other energies and asked them not to crawl into his head. After all, his head is his most precious, and he does. But energy told him she didn't want to do that, and immediately they went right up to his head and Deso felt a great pain. But the pain was so strong and powerful that he was just knocked right out onto the ground. The spirit asked, "Is it really dead?" But the second spirit replied that it was only a joy to him. The head at this point said, "Most of those who were dubbed perfect in Murima had put a similar beginning to this. But the Udon sect was considered the strongest in the past for a reason. But now, it was a mediocre swordsman clan." The healer was surprised and asked Chul who he was referring to other than himself. The head replied that the first was his deceased father. The second one is the one who killed 5 masters of the Central Plain, 5 kings and 5 noble men, started a war between the righteous clans and the demonic sect, and destroyed the Shaolin. He took over the demonic sect's repository of Buddhist treatises and tried to devour the plain and the past heavenly demon. But he turned demon, and his father, Namguang Pigwan, slit his throat. But his father had fought him. He said the heavenly demon also had the traits of a perfect one, but he didn't have the attributes to reveal it. The healer asked him why he started talking about that heavenly demon and the time when he hadn't gone cuckoo yet. And is he saying that the younger young lord has the traits of such a perfect one? But he admits Deso is a bit special. If you add 3 basic sword techniques to a divine physique, it would make an excellent foundation. But a foundation is just a foundation. No matter how impressive the foundation is, it falls short of true strength. And he only has 3 days to get something from the vault. Would he be able to make a significant change in such a short period of time? The head said that it's not like the healer hasn't experienced such a thing, so there's no faith in him. The dragon is just an illusion, and the phoenix is an embellished fiction. They are just watching, and will find out. The spirits were saying at this point that so much time has passed, and why is the soul not coming out? Suddenly Deso came to his senses and immediately stood up. The spirit was startled to see his face so alive. Deso was surprised and thought, how long had he been lying here? But when he looked at the hourglass, he saw that it had been 3 days, and he had barely a couple hours to spare, and he had to accomplish something to make an excuse to that psycho. The spirit laughed and said that it was obvious that his attempt to master the yin-yang art had failed miserably. Suddenly Deso noticed an energy inside him and asked, "What the hell is that?" There was something moving under his navel, and had the shit accumulated in 3 days of being out, though it shouldn't. Something had happened to his dantian. The spirits were shocked because they didn't know he'd make it. And in the wide open spaces, the seed had taken root. Although Bai Hui's point is blocked, the 5 elements are in their proper places. Usually this art was mastered by seemingly strong warriors, not boys like this. But martial arts skills increase with experience. From now on, the most important part would begin. Deso said suddenly. A chill suddenly ran through him for some reason. The spirit just realized that the seed would grow an ordinary weed. But the spirits said they would be watching him. And if he was of the same dough as them, it would be interesting to see how high he could go, coming out. Deso wasn't even surprised that the lousy Chechon didn't greet him, and his master had spent 3 days locked up and he doesn't even show his nose. Deso was angry and wanted nothing more than to meet him. After all, this time, he's going to beat him up badly. But suddenly the second brother Jun suddenly appeared and said that he was waiting for the younger one. Deso immediately remembered that familiar voice of the second brother. He asked him what fate had brought his brother here. Jun replied that he had come to check on his younger brother. Do you need a reason for that? Deso laughed and replied that he didn't. He was happy to see him too, but he realized that they were far from being in the right relationship to see each other for nothing. Jun started walking and told Junior to follow him. Deso didn't understand what was going on and asked him where to. Jun replied to his brother that if he came, he would find out. Upon arriving, Deso sat down at a big table of food and was shocked. Jun told the younger man that he called him over to eat together. No need to be shy, he could make himself comfortable. But Deso realized that his brother wouldn't do something without a reason, and maybe he put poison in the food. Jun gave a surprised look and said that he thought Junior liked meat, so all the dishes are made of it. And the way he sees it, Junior doesn't like this kind of table. Deso felt hunger in his stomach, and replied that not at all, and he was grateful to his brother for the treat. Immediately after saying that, Deso raised the plate of food above his mouth and devoured everything in order. June looked at all this with a shocked face and thought, is Junior cavalier or just inconsiderate? And what did Namgung Chechon see in his junior? To see for himself, he sent Namgung Chechon away, waiting outside the library. But the youngest is acting like a normal child, just like his age. But suddenly Deso turned to his brother. June asked him what was wrong. He realized that if Junior had a shred of intelligence in him, he would ask why he came here. Deso pointed at the food and asked his brother if he could eat 2 more bowls. At this point, June thought he was a pig, but didn't deny his request to eat the rest of the food. Deso was happy at this moment and said that his brother was so caring. June turned his head to the side and said that Junior was just a lousy person. But he saw that the younger one liked the fried mash and handed him another plate. Deso smiled and replied his brother that he was happy because of him, and he thinks the other brother is the best in the world. June was a little confused and didn't understand what was happening to him. He got a strange feeling in his chest and realized that he should have immediately ripped the younger one's jaws open and knock out everything he was hiding. But now something is keeping him from doing that, and it's very strange for him. But suddenly he saw that while Junior was taking the food, there was a strange energy coming from him. And that's when he realized that Junior had gotten it after all. And simple to understand but difficult to master was the art of yin-yang. And he has mastered it so perfectly that he uses it unconsciously. And the preliminary verdict of the serpent. But suddenly June suggested that he take a walk, and he would shake the food at the same time. But Deso thought it was strange, since his brother was so kind to him. And in his previous life, he wasn't like this, but a cold-blooded inhuman. He was even given a nickname to match the 3-headed serpent. Deso was surprised, because the existence of the yin-yang art should have been the first to be discovered by the older brother after a year. But when did the second brother have time to do so? Could it be that not only second brother, but all of Namguang's key talents had mastered the yin-yang art? And why did the teachings remain in the vault? June told the younger one not to rely on it too much. This martial art is only a provisional. Deso asked, what was the trick? But thanks to what did he expand the dantian so much? But although, can it really be called a dantian? After all, it is much larger, as if he is standing alone in the vast expanse. And as he sees it, that's not all. Compared to before, the entire visible world has changed. June saw Junior's face and asked, what made him stop? Deso apologized and replied that a tugging started in his stomach. He stopped and stared at the distant mountains for a bit. June told the younger man that he ate so much, no surprise. But suddenly Deso grabbed his stomach, and his brother asked, what's wrong? Is something wrong? Junior replied that he thought he caught indigestion. June let him go and said they'd talk about the rest later. Deso realized that his brother wasn't trying to hold him back. But June still felt as if he was possessed by something today. But noticed that the younger one wasn't running towards the healer's pavilion. June said afterward that he had met the younger brother in person. He had mastered the art of yin-yang, but on second thought, the departing strategist had a strange smirk, and now he was sure that the strategist was definitely up to something. But June decided that wouldn't be the case. He needed to figure out what was causing the discomfort of contact with the younger man. Deso had said while leaving that it was obvious that neither Big Brother June nor the other Namgung people had been able to discern the true effectiveness of the yin-yang art, and now he understood. Why, so, strong senior brother Day was working many times harder than the others. The world's strongest warrior, and coincidentally his father, the god of war, Namgung Hanchul. And Big Brother Day had gotten a glimpse of something from him. And in an attempt to keep up with it, he worked tirelessly. And in that case, if he were to meet his father today, he too could sneak something from him. Standing in front of the doors, the mercenary told the younger man that the head was waiting for him. Let him come through. Deso was surprised that his father knew he was coming, and he enters the head's chambers for the first time. Suddenly, he heard a voice outside the doors telling him to let the younger man come in. Deso entered and said that he begged pardon, and the head asked his son at once what he saw now. Deso did not understand at first and asked his father what he meant. The head told the son to answer how he saw his father in his eyes. Deso shuddered, and in his head he knew that his father was a great man. But to be that great, like standing naked in the open air, He could clearly make out his brother's silhouette. He thought he could keep up with him on sheer effort alone. But his father couldn't see him. Before he could make out some vague outline, as if he were obscured from head to toe by clouds. But now he can't see anything but clouds. And he realizes he's crazy. And why did he come to see his father now? And that father and that first brother, weaving behind him, is now so painfully aware of all the greatness of the Namgung family. And what martial arts are really like here. Only escape will help one remain unharmed among these monsters. Deso told his father that his eyes could see the head. The chapter hesitated and asked his son if he could see him. Deso was frightened and realized that he was just telling it like it is. What was wrong with this? The head asked his son if he wished to surpass him. Deso didn't understand anything and asked his father what he meant. The head replied that when he mastered the art of yin-yang, and after he looked at his father, he saw a huge golden dragon. And when the first son looked at him, he said he saw sharp blades. It's enough to see it once, and after that, the fascination will never go away. And now he wants to be like him. He wants to be like him, and he wants to surpass him. And that instinct is inherent in all living things. But Deso apologized and said he had no such desire. The head asked his son, then what does he want to become? Deso opened his eyes and saw that his father was not angry with him. He is also asking questions. Deso told his father that today he talks more than usual and shows a wider range of emotions. And did something good happen? Junior realized that the head would still figure out any of his lies, just express his feelings as they are. Deso answered his father that he would like to do farming in a quiet and peaceful place, and it seems to him that he has no talent for martial arts. Even just looking at the vault drills gave him a headache, and he thinks that the first brother should be the heir to the Namgung family. He didn't even have any thoughts of claiming to be the heir. And lately, he's also interested in trading. Shouldn't he do that too? And if the head orders him to, he can do his best. The head couldn't help himself after his words and suddenly started laughing. Deso didn't understand it and didn't know what it was about. The head said that there was already such a person in the Namgung family. Deso hid behind a beam and after hearing such words asked, "What?" The head replied that a person who pursued the same dream as him. He was even able to realize it. Deso became so curious and asked, "Who is he talking about? Is it someone from the direct line?" The head replied that it was correct. He wasn't banished because of the wounds he received in the duel, was he? The head replied that no one had ever left a scratch on him in his entire life. Deso rejoiced greatly, for there was still hope for him. A life colored with gold, without the threat of a hole in his belly. The head asked his son, was he not at all interested in what had become of this man? Deso replied that he was very interested, but somehow Deso was sure that he had consolidated his influence on the domain, or had become the head of the world's most successful trade guild. The head raised a finger to the sky and said he was there. Deso was surprised and didn't understand what his father was talking about. Deso suddenly said that he must have gone up to the roof of the chapter's estate? What a magnanimous man! The head replied that no, a little higher. Deso asked could he be higher than the roof, just the sky? The head got tired of listening to this nonsense and replied that was the end of it, and the younger man could go. Deso, leaving, thought he was in heaven and realized that such thoughts would lead him to heaven. But the past head of Namgun Pigwan asked his people if they lived well, cultivating the land in peace and quiet. But as a child, he had dreamed of farming somewhere quiet. Khan asked him why he had not done so. His father could do anything he wished after all. The head replied that it was not so easy. Even when Han lives peacefully and doesn't bother anyone, there are always people with broken fates who can make the world seem as if they are the only ones around them. But suddenly warriors rushed in and shouted to the head that there was trouble. And now Chief Khan realized that his son had the same dreams as his father, and apparently he has to hide his true feelings. But he asks his father to support his grandson. And it would be better if he himself experiences and realizes how difficult it is to live in peace and quiet. But then June comes to him and tells his father that he is making an important request of him. Maybe he would let him personally recognize his younger brother's abilities. The head asked the second son, "What is the reason?" June replied that it's because he is confused. He needs to understand his feelings towards his brother. The head told him that if they were to clash in a duel, there would be no guesswork. He would win. Whichever way you look at it, it would be an unfair victory. And strength is only one of the necessary qualities to become him. The head wasn't even surprised and asked, "What's next?" Jun replied for the head to let him and the younger one have a duel of representatives. Deso asked why that was so, but the second son said that if he loses in the duel of representatives, he would fulfill any request of Junior, and will declare in the presence of the family that he recognizes him as his successor. And also, since the dispute is favorable to him, he swears that even if he wins, he will not give the younger any trouble. Deso realized he was saying that because he was sure he wouldn't lose. The head said it was fair, but Deso didn't understand what was fair. The head asked the younger man what he thought himself, but Deso hoped he would get his act together immediately. Let him ask such a counter-question that there would be no more talk of it. Deso made up his mind and said that as far as he knew, a duel of representatives is held when the opponents might cripple each other because of anger, or the difference in strength is too great. And for the duel of representatives, a warrior is chosen to act in his stead. And of course the brother has many warriors to do it, but he has only one servant. All they know how to do is cook and wash. And they think it wise to have a duel? Of course he is grateful to his elder brother for the offer, but it will be difficult to fulfill. Jun realized it was the perfect excuse. Jun said as if he had no one. Deso was shocked and couldn't believe that his brother actually offered to send a servant. Jun told the younger one that he seemed like he didn't know yet about the changes that had happened during his time in the vault. Deso asked the elders, "What are they talking about anyway?" Jun replied that the strategist was building power under his name. Deso immediately got angry at Namgung Chechon. After all, that psycho just annoys him, and now he would just wipe him into powder for being so disrespectful to the Lord. 4 days ago, Chechon was sitting at his books saying that he was so busy building up Junior Master's influence. And now he still has to worry about all sorts of little things, from cleaning up shit, watching the yard, cleaning the stairs, cleaning the roofs, and trimming branches, that sort of thing. And his teacher must be doing very well in the house after dumping all the chores on him, and scrubbing over 1,000 steps a day. And what about the hired laborers who go down and up those stairs dozens of times? Chechon decided to speed up a bit and started to study the books he had accumulated faster. Suddenly he started laughing loudly and realized that this was why Namguang would never be bored with him. There was no way an ordinary person would be able to endure the amount of work that the hired laborers of the Namguang clan endured. What else would he expect from the workers of the world's strongest clan? These people should never be ignored. And if Junior Master finds out, he'll make such a fuss. And as a strategist, he shouldn't be deceived. But isn't it one of the 5 moral principles of a strategist that he should sacrifice the small for the great? How can he persuade them now, Chechion thought. These Murim are willing to do all of Namgung's petty errands when there isn't enough time even to learn martial arts. And he's sure they all have old injuries. They shined in the past, but now they are called scum. But while their status as wage laborers bothers him, they are a force free from foreign influence. And at this stage, they are just right for the young master. But all of a sudden, unexpectedly, Chechon felt a roaring in his stomach. He immediately left everything and said that he needed to eat first. He does all this in order to live and eat. In that case, why starve? Chechon locked his room and wondered what the sisters had prepared to eat today. He decided that first he should prepare a present for them. So he immediately started cooking. After the work was done, Chechion went out and felt that a pleasant smell was spreading all over the street, and tonight it must be boiled chicken for dinner. Opening the door to the house, Chechon shouted to his sisters that he was back, but was suddenly shocked by what he saw. The pavilion was completely filled with strange people eating everything. Sicheon wondered at once what brought them to the Junior Lord's pavilion. The girl grabbed him and said that Mr. Strategist had come to visit, and to begin with, let him sit at the table. Chechon asked his sister, what was going on here? The girl replied that these gentlemen are working so hard, but because of the constant shortage of food, they have to make do with only leftovers all the time. So the head maid treats them from time to time. And Mr. Strategist is just in time. She's bringing him food. And today they have a special meal. They have to work so hard every day carrying all kinds of heavy things. Let them eat and regain their strength." The worker thanked Mrs. Li Hyang for her concern. But Hyang asked him, "What kind of mistress is she?" "She is an ordinary servant, and the worker can omit the formality." Suddenly, Hyang shouted that she had prepared some light snacks for them to eat while working, and let them call her when everyone had eaten. But one of their workers started saying that all the girls deserved to hear respectful treatment in their direction, and they cook much better than the clan cooks. Jechon realized that they had gathered all the hired workers, who were difficult to gather in one place, and they had gained their trust. The sisters are unbelievable. Suddenly, an old man sat down next to Checheon and asked him what he was doing. He didn't think he would meet an important person here. Checheon was shocked to see the old man. After all, he was once a great Murim warrior and Shaolin monk representing the entire Central Plain, and he was called the Buddhist monk renegade Il-song by everyone. He had heard that the old man had lost his arm because of one incident, and it came as such a shock to him that he left the Shaolin. After that, he went traveling around the world, committed many murders, breaking the main commandment, and then disappeared. And this man is here now, and he is now in charge of cleaning the Namgung clan courtyard. Jechon replied to him that he wouldn't be long and thought he'd get something to eat. The old man said the food here is excellent, and then wishes the guy a pleasant appetite, and apologizes if anything is wrong. But in the moment he turned around and hit one of the sisters with his hand. The sister called him Mr. Glutton and asked him if he could do that. He's already eaten 3 plates and he's sitting there as if he hadn't been fed at all. And there are those here who haven't even eaten a spoonful. Checheon was frightened, for he knew it was better not to make such a man mad. The old man turned around and asked what kind of a glutton he was. His sister told him to take the last plate and no more. In the meantime, she would gather snacks for him and something for the night. And the girl said that he was the one who helped Ilhan when her legs gave out in the marketplace at the sight of the armed army. And she was extremely grateful to him for that, and asked him to treat her to a special meal. She also said that Mr. Janitor was much stronger than she thought. But the girl, leaving, said that the rest was already a secret. Everyone couldn't resist after that, and started laughing at him. One of the mercenaries asked, "Where would the old man go to drive a wedge against a noble senior servant? Let him stop talking nonsense and sit down at the table." But the old man couldn't stand it, and approached him with his menacing gaze, and asked the mercenary, was he looking down on him because of one hand? But suddenly the sister came in and started yelling at him. She said that everyone is eating though, and let them stop making noise and go back to eating. And let the uncles wait, she'll give them each another boiled leg. Chechen thought that despite their status as hired laborers, they were still warriors who only understood the language of strength and power. He didn't think they would be so obedient, and Master would be very surprised when he saw the sisters. But suddenly he remembered that this could be his chance. Jechon realized that there were about 50 such masters in the province, and that was more than enough to form a squad. And the sisters had managed to gather people who originally had nothing in common in one place. The mercenary suddenly spoke that this boiled meat was so delicious that he wouldn't be able to leave the Namguang clan. And there are those who have never tasted their cooking, but there are not those who have only tasted it once. The strategist realized that he couldn't miss such a unique chance, and may the young lord wait for him. He would unite his allies and bend them to his feet. Checheon turned to them and introduced himself, saying that he wanted to make them an offer, and he knows very well what kind of past they have had to endure. The old man immediately told the guy that he knew right away that they were here to disperse them. Checheon replied that, not at all, there was a much more important matter, and he was asking them to become the junior lord's men. The old man apologized and said he was addressing the wrong people. Checheon was surprised and asked why. The old man told him bluntly that they were no longer interested in Murim, and he was digging in the wrong place. Let them go and ask someone else. The strategist said, if not interested, let them go somewhere else in the village or mountains then. Why stay in the Namgung clan, running around on all sorts of small errands? The old man couldn't stand it and replied that because they lost. Blown away, so they suffered a total defeat. Checheon asked, is that what this is all about? The old man replied that it was sharpened in the sword. The strategist said that he generally understood everything. After all, he too had fallen into despair dozens, hundreds, thousands of times in the shadow of his teacher. And now the most important thing for them is to break the sword stuck in their memories. But he as a counselor cannot help them. And that's something only a Murim warrior like them can do. And he apologizes to them. And then he walks away. But the truth is, he knew he wouldn't give up that easily. And sure enough, there was another way. His sister met him and asked him if he was leaving already. Jetchon replied that urgent business had arisen, so he would have to leave. He felt he needed to get the sister's sympathy to win them over to his side. The sister told the master that he hadn't even eaten. Jetchon replied that it was fine. Not much here, but let them take it as a thank you. And then he headed for the exit and pretended to cry and said goodbye to them. Sis was surprised and asked what happened. He looked upset. The sister turned to the old man and asked what happened to Mr. Strategist. The old man replied that it seemed like nothing, except that they had rejected his offer. The sister immediately grabbed the food in front of him and asked, "Did they reject Mr. Strategist's offer? But why?" The old man tried to explain to her why, but he couldn't do it. Han said for them to see that every time Mr. Strategist comes to eat, he makes sure to bring something as a thank you. And Mr. Strategist is so kind. Is it hard for them to honor his request? And she's sure he wouldn't ask for something difficult. The old man averted his gaze to the side and apologized to her. But one of the mercenaries saw the gift and asked, "Isn't it a freshness pill?" The others also looked at it and asked, "Could it be pacifiers?" But the mercenary understandingly said that they are ignorant, and they don't know about such a rare item. After all, the great divine healer had only created 3 pills in his entire life, and the freshness pill is just one of them. And to remove all the toxins from the body, you need to rise to the level of a perfect master and go through bone remodeling. But by eating this pill, he will be able to get rid of all the toxins accumulated in the body. The mercenaries looked at it and said with burning eyes that it was just a treasure. But another sister came and said that she had 20 of them in her room. If they needed one, they could take one before they left. The mercenary replied that the freshness pill wasn't that easy to get. Sister said that she must be sick of them by now. The ones Mr. Strategist brought last time were tastier. But what were they called? And she thought there was a Malaya. The mercenary immediately thought, was it really a minor battle pill that increased Negun? The old man said right away that he knew that the strategist had a lot of influence within the clan. But to have it be that much, if he was handing out such valuable pills to his servants, it spoke volumes. The mercenary asked the old man if it might not be such a bad idea to take him up on his offer. Jetchon heard everything outside the door and decided that when he returned, he would have to look for something else to lure them in. 3 days later, Deso was practicing and said that it was at least good that he was able to delay his second brother's proposal. And Namgung Jaechun is crazy. Where did he go now? He's going to kick his ass so he can't do anything stupid anymore. Suddenly, he saw someone behind a tree and looked closer. But next to the bush, the old man with his sword who was tending the garden suddenly came out. The old man looked at his work and said that it looked good. But Deso answered him that branches are not usually trimmed like that. The old man looked at the boy and did not expect him to give his opinion. Deso asked him if he knew martial arts. The old man replied that he did. But Deso said that only his grandfather had apparently failed to master them. The old man was shocked at the boy's attitude and even got a little angry. But Deso said that, judging from the big picture, it was the martial arts of the Udon school. But his technique was like licking the rind of a watermelon. The old man decided that he, a former king of traditional swordsmanship, by some boy dares to be bullied? The former head of the 7 swords of Wudang, the undefeated mentor of the current head of Wudang traditional swordsmanship king. After a resounding loss to Namgung Hanchul, he left Mount Wuda. Or rather, he was banished because he got drunk, went on a rampage, and destroyed the ancestral pavilion. And after that, he vowed not to cause a disaster again, no matter how angry he was. And if it were the Wudang sect, he would have immediately created all the first-generation disciples, including the head, and smashed his head in. But Deso didn't stop, and told him that when the old man was trimming the bushes, let him not use his ridiculous martial art, and only what was needed should be cleaned up. Otherwise he might suffer from chi deviation. The old man had already heard of the madness, right? The old Deso turned around and said as he went. After all, he hadn't slept for 3 days already and his eyes were getting slippery. And anyway, Grandpa needed to be careful not to hurt himself. Suddenly, Deso replied that it was just immediately obvious. The old man asked, "In what place?" Deso walked over and replied that, "If you don't look closely, it looks like they are trimmed neatly." The old man asked, "In his opinion, isn't it?" Deso replied that yes, and besides, not only is his martial art lame, but he only uses it to trim bushes. A waste of energy. The old man was angry and tried to bear it all, but he wondered how the boy could know how deep the meaning of trimming bushes was. He knew, as a follower of the Wudang sect, he had been following the path of the living sword all his life. Although it's impossible for an immature boy to understand what the Wudang sect is based on. And even if it was about the Namgung clan, only someone of the level of an elder long ago would discern the essence. Deso grabbed a branch and said that bush trimming was invented to remove unnecessary things, and there is not a single flaw in his shearing. And that's why the bush seems neat from the outside, but it's worth shaking it even a little bit, as the weak branches fall down. The old man said he left them there on purpose. What's wrong with letting them grow? Deso replied that if there was nature here, he would agree. In the wild, there are birds or insects that would find a use for such weak branches. But this place is the Namgung clan's estate. No ordinary person sets foot here, and the birds and insects avoid it. And the wretched things won't even dare to come inside. It's the same with people. You have to cut off the weak branches to make the others grow well. And the water flows from top to bottom. The strong simply suppress the weak. But what happens if everyone is equal? The old man asked. Wouldn't that be a good thing? To live in peace and harmony? Deso laughed and asked him, "Does he really think so?" On the contrary, it will create another rivalry. New orders would be established, and while they were being legitimized, strangers would die. And that's why we must be brave enough to cut off the weak, at least for the sake of those who remain. By this, they are forcibly establishing order. Deso suddenly thought of something and asked the old man if he was familiar with styles. Usually, one style is based on one meaning, and everything else steps to express it. But if both one style and 2 and 3 carry the same meaning, what will become of that style? The old man replied that then the meaning of its variation would disappear. It would be one multiplied style arranged in order. The guy said that's exactly what it would be. The missing parts are made up for by deceptive maneuvers, and the oversaturated parts are forgiven by making them more concise. And by creating a certain fighting style, they naturally pave the way for it. And the end point of that path will be the meaning embedded in it. Deso demonstrated his technique, which the old man was simply shocked by. Deso said that although he couldn't tell which part of his martial art was lame, he could see from cutting this bush that he had put a lot of effort into it. Just by looking at the bush, one can feel the faint energy of traditional fencing emanating from the trimmed branches. And perhaps this is proof that they were sincerely following the path of martial arts. But if he continued to use this method, he would eventually run out of steam. And at this rate, he would soon run out of steam. The old man immediately recalled that 10 years ago, these were the exact words he had heard after losing from Namgung Hanchul, and to understand their meaning, he had to stay in the Namguong clan for 10 years. He didn't think he'd hear the same thing from the young man, and maybe he could give him the answer he wanted? He decided to ask, but someone interrupted him and called the old man a lousy man. The old man got angry and turned around and asked who dares at such a crucial moment. But when he saw the healer, he was frightened and immediately stopped talking. The healer turned to Deso and asked him if he knew how much he had spent to find him, and grabbing his hands said they needed to check his meridians. Deso replied that he was going to go to sleep in the first place. The healer said that so be it. He would put a needle in to give him a good night's sleep, and maybe get some sleep, but they should get going. The old man at this point looked at the bushes and saw that he was indeed overzealous. But suddenly the man came up and asked him why he was frozen. Isn't that a divine healer there? He had never imagined that he would meet him in such a place. The old man suddenly said that he thought he had finally found the answer. After checking, Deso couldn't even say a word as he immediately laid down on the sofa and fell into a deep sleep. The healer looked at him and said that he could see a clear change, and the muscles are developing according to age, and the weakened meridians have completely recovered. This was the body of a healthy person who would live a normal life without frequent ailments. And if they didn't know that his meridians were damaged, Even he, a divine healer, wouldn't have been able to suspect it and would have let it go. But now, the divine physique was revealed to its fullest extent. Suddenly, a girl came in and said that he had been sleeping for 2 days. Was he definitely all right? The healer replied that yes, healthy as an ox. He would even say that worrying is an unnecessary luxury. Suddenly, the physician smelled a very familiar odor and thought, is it a pill of freshness? But this pill will give all the other miracle remedies a head start. Someone like a servant wouldn't be able to get close to it. The Namguang family must have stashed it away somewhere. The healer thought he was just imagining things. One of the sisters was eating a pill and said that they were almost out of candy, and maybe ask Mr. Strategist for more. In the evening, Deso went outside and said he was tired again, and had just come out of the library and was already hunkered down. And even after 2 days of sleep, it still made him drowsy. So he decided to take a little walk. Suddenly, he used his eyes and saw that someone was following him. Deso immediately asked who was there. An old man came out of the bushes and said that it was astonishing. He had noticed his presence. Deso asked, is he the old man trimming the bushes? Are they close enough to meet in the middle of the night? The old man replied, he asked around the servants, and they said he was here. He waited for him for 2 days, but the master was asleep. There was no other way to meet. Deso asked in surprise. He waited for him for 2 whole days? And told the old man that, as he can see, someone has already honed his martial art. The old man asked the guy, he felt what? He had Nigun in perfect order. And he just sees this huge mountain, sees it, feels it, no difference. But this mountain is unshakable. Deso immediately got ready and asked him, he's not one of the mountain brigands, is he? The old man replied that he would appreciate it if he didn't compare him to those scum. Deso sat down on a stump and told the old man that he had reassured him, and he didn't care where he came from, but no mountain brigands in this house, and told him to sit down next to him, and it must be painful for him to stand on his feet. There was a very bracing breeze here. The old man replied that he might be a murderer, aiming for his life. Isn't the boy afraid at all? Deso told him that if he were a dangerous man, the servants wouldn't tell him where to find him. Deso suddenly told the old man that he hadn't suggested he lie down. The old man replied that he was indeed from Murim. In the past, he was far more prominent than a guy can imagine. Deso asked, even cooler than his father? The old man replied that they would put down the god of war, and asked the lad if he had a conscience. Deso laughed and asked, did he say something stupid? The old man said that a long time ago he challenged his father to the god of war and lost. He ended up losing his arm. Deso felt sorry for him and said that's what happened. The old man asked the guy, does he feel sorry for the cripple? Deso replied that he didn't. He knows exactly how he feels right now. There's definitely some trouble with that damned family. They'll cut open his belly and cut off his arm. And it must have been hard on the old man too. Deso took his hand and asked the old man, he didn't lurk in the Namguang family for revenge, did he? After all, his father knows nothing but martial arts, and he is really very strong. And so, if indeed he needs revenge, there is only one way. The old man was surprised and asked which one. Deso replied that he should wait until his father is 130 years old, then fight him and win, or let him surrender and he'd feel better immediately. And then I remembered that he came back once too. And usually, those who are reborn think they can achieve anything. But whether it's a return, a rebirth, or a past life, Deso said that it was time for him to go now since he was already falling asleep. The old man suddenly replied that it took about 10 years to realize such a simple thing. Seeing such a strong energy, Deso was simply shocked and didn't expect it. The old man turned into a monster and said that everything was right, and it would be easier to surrender. Deso immediately realized that this was a 1,000-year-old Shaolin. He mastered the martial art of Shaolin. The old man told the guy to tell the strategist that if he came back alive, that's when he would accept his offer. But Deso stopped him and said that as far as he understood, the old man was on his way to avenge his father. But what about living a quiet life? The old man asked the boy, didn't he say, surrender and then feel better? He's going to surrender now. Deso realized he didn't mean give up on life. The old man vanished and said goodbye that they would see each other next time. Deso wondered if there would be one. Come to think of it, Was that damn strategist up to something again? The old man came to his clan and said that in the future, when they met again, he would introduce himself to him formally. And he suddenly wondered what kind of world he would create. The worker asked, was he right? Had the meeting with the younger gentleman helped? The old man replied that it had even helped a lot. Now it was time for them to go break the chains that had held them back for 10 years. The old man and his partner immediately went to the head and told him that it had been 10 years since their last meeting, and today they had come to challenge him. The partner asked, would it be okay if they did it together? The head stood up and replied that they were well worthy to challenge him to a fight once more, but they must know what it means to fight him in a duel. The partner said that although now he was just a laborer trimming trees, but no matter how he did it, he had been a Murim warrior in the past and was ready for any outcome. The old man asked, but would they show up without any determination when he was the one who was their opponent? The head looked and told them that they had changed. But what was it that made them change? The old man answered him that if he defeated them, they would tell him a secret. The head smiled and said that was curious, and immediately pounced on the two of them with his huge fists. The head left behind huge marks on the ground and said that he still missed one punch. The head asked in surprise, was it he who had changed? The old man replied that their eyes could see, and they changed for the same reason. He had seen it himself, after all. From that boy Namgung Deso. The head asked if that meant he had changed. The old man and his partner couldn't hold on anymore and fell to the ground. He immediately remembered his attack from a few minutes ago and said that maybe he had indeed changed. The head told the old man that once again he had picked up something entertaining and even gave him a little something to think about. In the morning, Deso went to his sister's house and asked if she was here. His sister met him and asked him what brought him here. The boy replied that he had heard from the older servants that they were now nursing those who had helped them a lot. So, he decided to stop by and say hello at the same time. Deso asked her how she was feeling, but when he saw the men, he was surprised and asked what they were doing here, and was shocked that they came back alive. Gardner replied that it sounded like the guy was just waiting for them to die. Deso was surprised and asked, didn't they go for death? The old man replied that was also true, but they were lucky. The sister approached them and asked the gentleman, do they know each other? Deso replied that it just so happened, and asked the sister if she could step out for a bit. He has something to talk about with the old men who don't listen to others at all. The sister replied that she would go out and if they needed anything, let them call him. Left alone, Deso told them to answer. Why did they stay here? The gardener replied that he was getting old and something was wrong with his memory. Deso smiled and said that he would have to help them remember now, and it seemed that he was going to meet with the Shaolin abbot and the head of the Wudong clan tomorrow, and he would have to tell them that there were 2 rats lurking in Namgung Manor. The old man immediately said that they would tell him everything he was interested in. The old man realized that after he was trashed by the head, he had left the position of head and wandered off, only to be attacked again 30 years later and laid to waste. If the cursed monk found out, it would be a disgrace. The gardener saw the monk's condition and said he would crack all his teeth that way, and asked what was the panic about. What did he do when he left the Shaolin? You'd think he'd destroyed the ancestral pavilion. And then Gardner remembered that it was him. He remembered that he had gotten a lot of trouble from his younger brothers for wiping out the nameplates made by his mentor during his lifetime. The old man said it was better to be told off by a younger student, but he didn't want to be told off by his apprentice. Deso immediately noticed that, judging by his reaction, he had poked the right place. And he doesn't know how each of them honed their martial arts, but considering they're not in Shaolin or Wudong right now, but in the Namgung family, the method isn't exactly legal. And maybe they were peeking secretly and hiding in Namgung Manor to avoid being seen by the Shaolin and Wudong. Deso said he's giving them exactly 10 minutes. If they continue to remain silent even after that, he will hand them over to Shaolin and Wudong. The gardener asked his partner, didn't he say that virtuous qi emanates from this guy? The old man asked him back. Didn't he claim that the guy's body was fragrant with righteousness? They expected him to be able to crush the monster they themselves had already surrendered to. Deso looked out the window and said the weather was perfect, and just right for a homecoming. And to summarize, the old man, he had defied his father in the past, But after a resounding defeat, he had returned to Udon and made a bit of a mess of things there. And the higher-ups noticed and expelled him from the clan. And as of now, there are about 50 people like them who lost to the Namgung family in the estate. The old man replied that was correct. Deso thought for a moment and asked why they rushed to him like dung flies. The old man replied that calling them dung flies was somehow a bit much. They have nowhere else to go, and maybe they can help each other. Deso replied that they had challenged their father and lost again, and as a bonus they were also fired from their previous jobs. But why should he be held responsible for that? Gardner replied that he was adamant about such a thing. But the old man asked, why be turned away from them? The traditional swordsmanship king and the renegade monk are willing to become his subordinates. The strategist, on the other hand, was almost on his knees begging them to do so, claiming that the younger lord had nothing. Deso said, thinking about the events coming up, he too vaguely felt he needed to build up his strength. But though Deso asks them if the two of them have money, the old man replied that he didn't, and he had drunk it all away. Deso realized that these elders were not even listed in the family headquarters. They could not be expected to support them financially. The old man asked what was so important about this money. Deso replied that it wouldn't work that way. If they want to be on board with him, have each of them bring 100 nyang as an entrance fee. By itself, it will be renewed every month. The gardener told the young man that he had misunderstood something. They are not the kind of people who have to pay to join. Deso asked, now what? Are they stronger than his father? The old men both answered that no. The guy said that, in general, he has a conscience too. He wouldn't just take the money. If they pay him, he will help them raise their fighting prowess. The old men were surprised and asked, is that really so? The sisters were eavesdropping on everything, and one of them said that the conversation was dragging on. But the other asked, how did the three of them even meet? The sister asked them suddenly if they were hungry. The girls replied that they were a little hungry. The nurse pulled out the pills and asked if they could snack on these. The girl replied that they had been entrusted by the younger master after all. What if he asked for them back later? The sister replied that they would take what was left from the room. They had plenty of them anyway. Oh, and their conversation would obviously drag on, so just let them gobble it up. The girl asked her sister if she thought, looking at the old people, they were okay. The sister replied that the healer had examined them and said they would be back on their feet once they got a good rest, and gave them permission to pounce on the candy already. But then the cure ran in and yelled for them to stop. The physician took one in his hands and said that he thought he was already dreaming, but wasn't it a pill of freshness? How did they get them in the first place? The nurse replied that they were given them. The healer was surprised and asked who gave them to them. Just then, Chechon came and said that today was a happy day. All the honored gentlemen have gathered in one place. The healer ran and grabbed the box immediately from his hands. When he opened it, he saw that there was only one pill in it. The healer asked where all the pills that were inside had gone. The strategist asked where. Of course they were eaten. The healer asked him if he knew what it was. The strategist replied that they were freshness pills. It's all written on the lid. And the physician's eyesight must be failing him. Or is that normal at his age? The physician just cried and started laughing. How many pills did he have to eat to get the scent from the servant's body? 5 pieces? Or even 10? The strategist replied that he understood. And they must want a pill too? You should have said so right away. He snatched one and will bring it to him. The healer was very angry that he had destroyed the box with his own hands. The strategist immediately turned around and said that he would bring it. And why was he doing this to him? Suddenly Deso came out and asked, why are they making such a fuss? Chechon saw the young master and was so happy that he even blushed. But Deso immediately got angry and began to shout at him. But the strategist got scared from the physician and hid behind the lord. The healer looked at the old men and said that as he can see they are both fine now. The old man replied that he was grateful to him, and they had a good rest. The healer said there was nothing to be done. He had business to attend to as well. Deso looked around and said that, judging by the situation, he understood what was going on, and he thought the medic wanted to have a serious talk with the asshole. The healer replied that was correct. The healer grabbed the strategist and started dragging. Sichan asked the young lord to stop him from picking him up. Deso switched to the sisters and said they were free to go. and he needs to talk some more with the people here. But he doesn't know what happened there, but he's straight up cheered up. And now one less thing to worry about. Coming out into the square, Deso told the old men that they would stop here and asked the gardener to show any martial arts he knows. He will watch and tell if he has any mistakes. The gardener saw that the guy had a good eye for martial arts, but he wouldn't forgive him for calling his martial art clumsy. And now they would see if he could guess what it was. The gardener immediately began his technique, and Deso immediately felt a rush of wind. The old man looked at it and said that gardener was serious. The wind follows the path of the sword. The sword is pointed where the wind blows. And naturalness, the pinnacle of Wudong's martial art based on harmony. His sword of wisdom had finally reached completion. The gardener asked how he felt about this. Deso replied that it wasn't bad. The old man immediately told the guy that he was lying extremely shitty. And if it's because of a sense of dignity, it's better to tell it like it is. They would understand. Deso thought immediately, what do they want him to say? That's all he can tell them. Deso told the gardener to give the sword, and he would try to replicate the old man's dance one-to-one. The gardener didn't believe it, and told him to try if he could, of course. And the sword of wisdom can only be reproduced by cultivating the chi of primordial chaos since childhood, honing it for decades, and making countless breakthroughs. And a boy who doesn't even know the basics of a martial art would replicate it after only looking at it once? Deso told them to watch closely and would tell them what was different. Deso went into his subconscious and watched all the moves that Gardner demonstrated. Deso simply closed his eyes at that moment and repeated all the movements exactly as Gardner had done. The old man watched and said that it looked quite good, and one style of the wisdom sword was almost complete. Deso realized that it was a progressive martial art, which was why Murim warriors were willing to lay down their bones for an outstanding technique. And he was already thinking of going a little further. The gardener, seeing the continuation of the technique, was just shocked and opened his mouth wide. Deso realized perfectly well that he had already advanced to the second style of the wisdom sword. So he decided to complete it as well. Deso began to feel the softness coming from the sword enveloping his body. It followed his legs, his arms, and his heart. But suddenly Deso realized that he didn't want it to end here. He wants to dance on. And dance some more to show the old men. Deso was just showing his moves, in which the seed inside him started to give off energy. The gardener said he gives up. Once this dance is over, they will have to look into the clan again and steal something. Deso paused and said that was the end of it, and he wouldn't bring it up again. Let them not squeeze it out of them. They just have to go with the flow. And with each movement, his body becomes lighter and more alert. He could even understand why Marima warriors were willing to lay down their bones for a martial art. And, needless to say, he stole the traditional swordsmanship technique as well. The gardener suddenly asked the guy if he wanted to create the world's best Taoist school with him. He would take charge, and he would be made the head. The old man suddenly turned to the guy and said that he must have heard of Shaolin, and maybe he would consider turning Shaolin into the world's best Buddhist school. Deso told them not to talk nonsense, and asked the old man should he see his martial art. The old man replied that he would say no. Deso immediately turned around and said he would go, and they will get the details as soon as they bring 200 nyang. If they cheat, let them come to the pavilion. The old man noticed that this child had taken away Mu Chokchi's sword of wisdom. Looking at this, he can't give up his technique so easily. However, why is there an aura of Bodhidharma emanating from this kid's body? The gardener left and said that 200 nyang was just nothing. The old man asked him where did he go. The gardener replied that he would clean udon and return in no time. 200 nyang would be enough, wouldn't it? The old man asked him if he was in his right mind. He understands. It is a great shock when a technique to which he has devoted his whole life, this boy repeated the first time, figured out its true meaning and continued. But there is no other talent like this to be found in the whole world. A genius, no other way. But in Murim, sometimes geniuses are born. You should not be upset. The gardener replied that he wasn't, and the old man just didn't see it. There is a story that is only passed down between the successors of the Sword of Wisdom. His teacher had told him in the past that he had recognized his talent early by taking him on as a student. but his character was completely incompatible with the Taoist path. Mu replied to the teacher that he had tried very hard to tame his temper. Now he doesn't even beat up his disciples for nothing. But the master told him that Taoists don't beat people at all, and henceforth he too is considered a worthy successor to the Sword of Wisdom. And today he will tell him a legend passed down only between successors. On the day when his Sword of Wisdom does not create a stream of air, the world will shudder at the greatness of Wudong's sword. Mu was surprised and said that he was waving his sword. How could there be no wind? The teacher replied that, that's why it's a legend. So now Mu asks the teacher to see how it is like the world shudders just from Namgung's names. But Deso said that there is something naive about old people. It's because they have devoted their whole lives to martial arts. Maybe he should have quoted a higher price, and he feels like he could have gotten a lot more than 200 nyang. Mu asked, is there really no other way? He really doesn't want to mess with him. The monk asked, so what now? Go to the mountains and steal? That's all that's left. For 200 nyang silver, they will have to work here for 20 months. Ordinary people have to work for decades to see that kind of money. Does he know another way to get it right now? Mu made up his mind and replied that it was time to go to him. Monk asked his partner, what does he think he wants? At this time in the expense pavilion, the chief was asking his workers, who filled out the ledger yesterday? The guy answered that the one who stepped in the lowest position. The chief asked if it was him again. Tell him to get him in here right away. How many times has he gotten the name wrong already? Yesterday's deal was for a large sum of money, and to make such a mistake, where did he go? And then the old man came in and asked the chief, did he call him? The chief asked, is he the one working for him? If it wasn't for the chief's order, he would have fired this old man by now. The old man turned around and answered him that if there was nothing to say, he would already go. The chief got angry and shouted at him to stop. The man told him that he was ordering him to rest if his eyes were already bad. And now a new ledger would have to be made because of him. The old man admitted his mistake and apologized. The chief asked him, did he think that apologizing was the end of it? Let him get out of the pavilion today. The old man was surprised and asked, did the head approve of his dismissal? The chief replied that he would somehow persuade the head, so let him get out of here now. The old man asked him if he was sure he wouldn't regret it. The headman replied that the only thing he regretted in life was not knowing how his wife was cheating on him by continuing to shower her with money. The old man laughed and said that there was a lot to regret. The chief asked the old man, is he laughing at other people's grief? If it wasn't for the chief's orders, he would have finished him off long ago. The old man asked him if he wanted her to be avenged. After all, nothing is impossible for money. The chief was surprised and replied that he didn't even know where she was now. Now he is more angry with him than with his wife, so let him leave here already. The old man left and said he felt sorry for the deputy head. If his son had been a little older, he could have watched him die at his hands before he left. The child is already motherless, and now he will lose his father too. Even his conscience gnaws at him. The boy asked the deputy chief to come to his senses, and immediately seeing that he was not well, asked to call a doctor. The old man came to the table and said that he wanted to give it to him personally, but things got complicated. This was his last gift. He put a letter on the table in which was written the number of the gnome, which was on the right side of the outskirts, and signed at the end as Widow Yoon. The old man went outside and thought, where should he go next? And thought that this was enough to pay his debt to the head and could now return home. But then a monk came up to him and asked him if he could borrow 200 nyang in silver. The old man replied that they were like beggars, and no skill at all in asking for a loan. Mu got angry and said that's why he didn't want to go to him. The old man knew he needed a good reason for these vagabonds with inflated egos to come to him voluntarily, and he could already smell the money, and he should take advantage of that to make some money. The old man said that they needed 200 nyang as a contribution to join young master Namgung's subordinates. Mu replied that if he understood everything, let him give the money already. They would pay it all back to him later. The old man told them that if the two of them decided to join, the guys below them would also follow their decision. And that's about 50 people. Mu was very angry because that damned money demon smelled money. Although he was once the richest man in the plains, he was even called the Golden King. But because of his obsession with wealth and his willingness to sell his parents and children for money, He was nicknamed the Money Demon, but no one knows what he's capable of when he sees there's something to be gained. The old man said they want to force the Gold King to act because of some 200 nyang. Why don't they raise the stakes? Let them go and call all their henchmen. Whether it's 10,000 nyang or 100 nyang, he will only decide whether to give it or not after seeing the junior lord in person. At this time, Deso was practicing in front of his house. His sister said that the lord, as soon as he came back, he immediately started dancing with his sword, and even wondered what happened outside. Second sister asked, wasn't that surprising? She had always thought that martial arts was something rough, powerful, and stubborn, so it didn't go along with them. But looking at the young master's dance, she somehow feels a peacefulness on her soul. Sister asked the elder maid, are all martial arts really so beautiful? The elder replied that she herself had not narrated many martial arts in her entire life, but the young master's sword dance is something else. And if it's considered a martial art, then she wouldn't mind learning it. The sister told the elder that they have a rule, and only one at a time. The elder replied that she was old, and her eyes were failing her. The sisters said that was a lie. She could even see what was going on in the distance. The eldest immediately got angry and looked at them with her eyes. The sisters immediately realized that things were bad. They were getting too cocky. Suddenly, the elder heard something and said that someone was walking outside. The sisters were surprised and asked her why she was suddenly talking about it. Immediately after saying that, the door opened and a bunch of mercenaries entered the pavilion. The sisters were surprised and asked, "Isn't it business hours?" The sister stepped in front of them and told them to stop. They can't barge in unannounced after all. Moo's sister replied that since that was the case, then let them wait for Junior Master to finish the dance. He had only recently started. Deso thought during the dance, what's the matter? And what was all the noise around him? But he realized that there were too many eyes around before, and he was forcibly holding his negong. But one can't let the force go wild like last time, so now he would try to infuse some negun. Suddenly, he paused in a moment and asked what was the matter. After all, he remembered that not too long ago, the sword path had stalled at this place. But now a new path had opened up to him, and he decided that this is where he needed negun from now on. And when he saw the energy, he asked, is it really that good? And realized that today the world would see this dance for the first time, and he would call it the Cloud Sword. Looking at his stomach, he saw the core boiling. Looking around, Deso was shocked and asked, where are all these people from? Also staring with goofy faces. Mu was shocked at the Lord and asked, what was that all about? Okay, he was surprised when the kid repeated Style 1 and reproduced Style 2, although he hadn't been shown it yet. But at least it was a familiar wisdom sword. But what? The old Deso didn't understand anything and asked, who is this? And who are all these people? And why are they gathered here? His sister replied that she had heard that he had made an appointment. Deso asked, what kind of nonsense is this? There was no such thing. The monks Deso decided to remember the entrance fee. Did they mean 100 niang? Mu replied, that's right, they do. Deso asked, then did everyone here bring the entrance fee, 100 niang each? And together, it all adds up to 5,000 niang. But you can tell right away they're all ragamuffins. The Golden King stepped forward and said the money is for him. Deso asked him, who is he anyway that he keeps interfering? The Golden King asked the gentleman if he had heard of the Chonka money shop. It was once called the best money shop in the world, and he is the master of this trade guild. And the master has been bringing in a lot of interesting things to their shop, and it's been steady for a whole year. Their head is a strict secrecy guy, so he won't reveal what he's left for them to keep. Now there's a reason he can trust him. And how does that? Convince the lord of his solvency? The mercenaries were shocked and asked, how much is this even? And that 1 talon in value is equal to 10,000 nyang in silver. And he has as many as 5? Deso rejoiced and said that he didn't know they had a dear guest coming to see them, made him stand in the blazing sun, and he could go inside. The sister immediately said that their lord was a good man, but he had a taste for money. He's had a great love for it for a long time. The Golden King said he would come in, but he did not say he would give the money to him. Deso asked him if he needed anything from him. The Golden King asked the gentleman if he knew Namgung Chon. Deso was surprised and asked, What does the elder have to do with him? The Golden King replied that he owed him revenge. He wants to see him trampled into the mud. That's doable, isn't it? And if the Deso and they had collectively gone insane. The mercenary suddenly became angry and asked the Lord what he just said. Deso realized that he was so surprised that he hadn't noticed at all when he said it out loud. Suddenly, Deso wondered why he should be the one being cautious, and said they were collectively insane. And where had he gone wrong here? Let them at least look at these old men. They were beating their chests that they'd take revenge, and in the end, they lost their jobs and were left with nothing. But the mercenary suddenly started laughing loudly and said that the Lord had called them crazy. Deso got angry and told them to stop laughing. And what was wrong with him? Are they really crazy? The mercenary said it was the funniest thing they'd heard in a while. Just briefly, but everyone let go of what they had been holding back for decades. They felt free, and the Lord must understand. They watched his sword of wisdom. It was incredible, and a sword of wisdom should be a sword of wisdom and nothing else. But he decided to go against the rules, and the boy managed to do what no one in the audience had managed to do for 50 years. How could one not laugh? The mercenary went to the Gold King and asked him to lend him 100 niang in silver. After him, everyone else started asking him for money. Deso was surprised and asked what was wrong with them. Mu introduced himself and said he was asking the Gold King to lend him 100 niang in silver. Deso was surprised and asked, "Are these grandfathers the former head of Shaolin and the strongest sword Wudan? What is even going on here?" Golden King Kim introduced himself and said that he is addressing the junior lord of the Namgung clan and asking him if he would accept them. Deso was shocked and said that he thought they all misunderstood something. He's not going to avenge them at all, nor does he have that kind of power. The mercenary shouted that they saw the future in their sword dance. Deso replied that he was just dancing. What did they see that way? Mu stepped forward and told the Lord that what he did was not just any sword dance. It was a traditional wisdom sword. Deso was surprised and asked, "The same wisdom sword known as Wudang's strongest swordsmanship art. Was that the one he was repeating now?" The monk came out and replied that he had seen the world and could tell that sometimes it was easier to explain with actions than words. The monk immediately demonstrated the first strike. Deso was a little surprised but not dumbfounded. The monk asked the Lord if he could do it again, and if he could, have him try to infuse the negun into the punch. Deso proceeded and replied that even a dog and a cow would repeat it. And a seemingly ordinary fist punch. Suddenly something exploded near them, and Deso asked, "What was that just now?" The monk replied that it was amazing, and the gentleman had just repeated the fist art of 100 steps. Deso asked the old man, what was he talking about, and asked one of the mercenaries to show any martial art he could. The mercenary pulled out his sword and told the Lord to watch carefully, and immediately demonstrated. But Deso also drew his sword and easily repeated the same movements of the mercenary. Deso immediately realized that it really worked, and asked why. The monk replied that it was truly a remarkable talent. Unbelievable. Deso thought it might be that he had mastered the basics, and in the moment he remembered the Creator, and decided that maybe this gentleman's delusion that he had created 3 basic techniques to master all existing swordsmanship techniques wasn't a delusion at all. The Golden King smiled and said that on such a momentous day he couldn't do without a drink, and today he was paying for everything, and they could eat as much as they wanted. Deso raised his hand and said that it was too early for him to drink alcohol. The mercenaries turned around and started laughing at him. Deso decided to pour the Golden King a drink and said that thanks to him everyone is having fun, and let him accept a cup from him. The Golden King replied that of course he would, and alcohol from the young lord is sweet. Deso asked him why he wanted to take revenge on Elder Namgung Chon. The Gold King asked the Lord, has he ever seen such a mountain of money that he can't even count? One day he woke up and realized that he owned wealth that had no end to it. And once he realized that, he felt bored with the world. And during this time, as a merchant, he had often suffered at the hands of Murim warriors, so he was determined to squander this money. Deso asked how is it to squander the money. The Golden King replied that he was buying up all sorts of rare treasures. Legendary armor, legendary sword. He bought up everything that was legendary. The value of these treasures couldn't even be measured in money, and eventually, his once inexhaustible supply began to noticeably dwindle, and after the Golden King replied that he began to fight the Marima warriors. Needless to say, he did not choose strong opponents from the beginning. He started with ragamuffins, and at the end, he could easily defeat third-rank masters. And warriors below the third grade were no different from ordinary people. But from the second grade onward, the master was no longer called a Murima warrior for nothing. His fist was elusively fast, but that didn't mean he was able to pierce through the water dragon's armor. When he came upon a master of the first rank, his sword emitted light, and as he approached, he was overcome with fear. But just when he thought he was about to meet his death, the 10 million Niang gold poison on his elbow lightly touched the warrior's body, causing him to barely win. It was then that he realized, even the Murim warrior in front of the poison was just as human as himself. Although it was difficult to inflict poison on higher-level masters, but even them he could defeat. Until one day he met Namguang Cheon. He was a monster. Even Murim warriors were nothing. I should have started living like this earlier. If even the sword chi of excellent masters can't pierce the armor of a water dragon, then he has nothing to fear. And maybe he should open the world's strongest martial arts school. But he wondered, what kind of vagabond stood in his way? The Golden King told him not to stand in the middle of the road and let him get off while he was being kind. All he got in reply were motherfucking words. The Golden King was surprised and asked the stranger if he had now swore at him. The man replied that some wretched vagabond had interfered with his great epiphany, and now it had left him forever. He had gained it with such labor, having passed to the highest level of skill. Have the old man approach him now. The Golden King said that he thought some vagrant had blocked his way, but now he sees that he is just crazy. He doubts the man is even of Murim. But is he really a supreme master? And something about him is just too twisted. The man immediately used his attack and knocked the Golden King's helmet off his head. The man asked the old man why he was gnarled. I mean, he had hit him lightly. And sure he wasn't fooled? The Golden King asked the man, so he wasn't just bluster? And in that case, how's this for him? Making a round ball of fire, he immediately attacked the man back. But the Muzhik didn't have time to react, and set up his elbow and got hit hard. The Golden King said that even one poison needle would be enough to spread the poison all over his body. And when he counted to 3, he would lose his sight. When he counted to 7, his muscles would stiffen. And when he counts to 10, all his senses will stop working and his heart will squeeze in agony. And as soon as he counts past 30, he's dead. However, he can not just take and kill the first person he meets. If the guy realizes his own mistake, he will give him the antidote. But the guy didn't answer anything and started to get angry. But the Golden King told him to stop being brave, let him drink soon. But the kid drank nothing and slowly sucked all the poison from his body and spit it right in front of the old man. The Golden King was shocked and said, "How could this be possible? If those needles pierced the skin, even a divine healer wouldn't be able to take them out." And he got rid of them on his own. The guy answered him. As soon as the old man struck him with the needles, he tensed every muscle in his body, and yet he had failed to prevent the poison from spreading. At least in that he could be proud of himself. And that would have been enough to kill all sorts of little bugs with one blow. And it looks like he's got a lot of interesting tricks up his sleeve. And is there any more? The guy immediately grabbed the Golden King's arm and ripped out the armor. The old man looked at him with astonishment and didn't understand. How did this happen? The old man looked at his hands and saw that the water dragon armor was ruined. The guy started laughing at him and asked him where he was using it all, and started to tear it all out in order. But the Golden King was greatly displeased, for his treasure was gone. This monster's hands tore them up with ease, like a simple piece of paper. The guy was exhausted and said that he didn't even think he'd get so elated. And he couldn't remember when that had happened in the last few years. And the old man helped him blow off steam, so he can just fuck off, and could count himself lucky. The Gold King asked the guy what his name was. The guy turned around and asked back, "Is he out for revenge?" The king replied that he was just wondering. The guy smiled and said his name was Namguang Cheon from the Namguang clan. The mercenary said his village called him a talent, something that comes along once every 50 years. He thought he was a genius, if only it wasn't for that scumbag Namgung Hwache from the Great Abyss Sword Squad. The second mercenary said that once he met some old man on his way. He said that if he followed him, he would never become a punching bag again. And now he realizes he's been tricked. They had a martial arts duel in their village, not to say very large scale, but not so small either. And everyone predicted he'd win. Another mercenary said he was happy to high heaven when he accidentally found the secret techniques of 10 of the greatest masters in a cave. But when he went public 10 years later, he got his skull fractured. Deso realized that the 50 people gathered here were all geniuses, capable of making a name in their respective fields. But the encounter with the incredible monsters from the unheard-of clan called Namgung had shattered their hopes and dreams early on. And among the people who bear the surname Namgun, he is the only one who can understand their feelings. And perhaps they all already know the outcome, yet can't give up like he once did in the past. Deso got angry and said, "Here they are, bags of regrets. What's the big deal here? He will give them everything. And the revenge, too, that they desire. He will fulfill it for them." The mercenaries, hearing these words, simply rejoiced and started shouting the Lord's name. In the morning, Deso woke up and clutched his head and thought, why did those old men get him drunk? The healer Deso was surprised and asked what kind of conversation. The healer immediately asked him to convince his maids to become his apprentices. He sought out the maids to find out what other elixirs the scoundrel had fed them besides the freshness pills. They were able to distinguish all the pills by smell alone. Moreover, they were even able to determine the approximate composition of each one. Such talents could even become divine healers, so he asked them to become his disciples. But they refused. Therefore, he came to him personally as their master, and he asks the master to try to change their minds. If they suddenly become his disciples, he would gladly go to his side. Deso told the summoner that in this matter, one should never be pressured in any way. He would support his elder sister's choice. The Lakar rejoiced and replied to the Lord that he was far better than his father. Coming out to the pavilion, Deso was shocked and asked, "What are these other corpses?" The healer replied, "Not to worry, they are all alive." Deso saw Chechon and asked, "Where did he come from?" Deso walked up to him and asked, "What is he doing?" Chechon asked the gentleman with anger, "Why is he so late? His arms almost fell off while carrying those drunks." Deso smiled and said he was pleased to see him suffer, and told him to keep going. Secheon replied that he wasn't kidding. He really was going to die. Upon entering home, the sisters greeted him and told him that the young master was already awake. Deso looked around and asked what they had brewing here. Was it soybean soup? The sister said yes, and asked the gentleman if he would taste it. Would he taste if there was enough salt? Deso tasted it and said it was just right, and asked the sisters if they were planning to become healers. Deso looked at the healer and said that he had heard it all himself. But the physician asked them, did they reject his offer because of the younger lord? The sisters answered him nothing and remained silent. But Deso asked them, was it really because of him? But why? He is no longer a little boy who needs an eye on him, but the healer said he was just a real child. And then Chechon came in and told them to wait. They would like to make the sisters their apprentices too. Deso called him crazy and asked, who bid him? Is the old man here as well? The Golden King replied that he had been watching them all day yesterday and could tell they had a talent for spotting treasures. And besides, they are savvy. How could one not want to poach them? Chechong approached Li Hyang's sister and said that he was appointing her as Namgung Chechong's assistant counselor. Deso got angry and asked what was even going on. Checheon told Hyang that she had passed the scholastic exam at the same age as him, but the family had gone bankrupt, and the sad fate of a servant awaited her. And he could only entrust this position to her. But the physician entered the conversation and said that he had approached them first. But Chechon asked him that he should not be so greedy, and the old man asked, wasn't their own choice more important? Deso freaked out and throwing them out the door, told them to wait outside so he could think. Left alone, he told them to talk. And he knows it's unexpected, but it's a chance in a million for them. He wants to hear what they really think. The sister replied that, to be honest, she doesn't know herself. She likes to live together with everyone, as it is now. But on the other hand, It's interesting to see a new world. Hui also said that she might have been sold into slavery in the past if it wasn't for her auntie. She won't have enough life to repay her favor. And now no, all the moments spent with the younger master and all that will be in the future will remain the happiest time of her life. The third sister said that she would do anything he only orders, because there is only one master for her. Deso sis. On top of that, their seats will always be empty. If they get bored or have a hard time, they can return at any time. After all, they're his family. But when Il-hyang becomes a healer and starts making pills, they are all his, do they understand? And if Li-hye becomes an assistant counselor, a lot of financial transactions will pass through him. And if Sam-hyang's sister becomes the old man's apprentice, all the stocks of the world are his. Then he will become rich. But it's all just speculation. He's not just trying for his own sake. It wouldn't hurt to be a little greedy to make them all happy. They know how he feels, don't they? The sisters replied that it was even too good. The healer walked in and asked if they had made a decision. Deso smiled and replied that yes, Sister Il-hye will become the disciple of the divine physician, Sister Li-hyang the counselor, and Sister Sam-hyang the old man, and they would take care of his sisters. They immediately felt uneasy after saying that. The healer was pleased and said that they would discuss the details outside, and let her rest properly today, and tomorrow they would wait for her in the infirmary. But then they saw the master and asked where they would start. It was the first time they had a teacher, and they were burning with impatience. Deso, he would have to learn from someone himself, for nothing is held in his belly. The monk said there's no one here who doesn't know about it, and first of all, his fighting ability was barely past the 3rd grade. Deso told him that he had called him a genius not too long ago, and yet, things would change if they studied their martial arts. And like he said, he needs to learn the skill from someone who surpasses 3rd rank. It would sound strange from his mouth, but the martial arts of everyone here were not inferior to those of the Namguwang family at all. Ultimately, martial arts depend on the person who uses them. In any case, it would be better to understand and practice. Deso was surprised and asked, "What is he saying?" The monk immediately punched the gentleman and shouted that he was a Buddha almighty. And while they start with a couple punches, Deso started fending off the attacks and said that was just nonsense. But the monk didn't stop and replied that less words, more action. The rest of the mercenaries had already taken a turn and were ready to engage in battle. Monk attacked him and said that this is the pursuit of virtues. And this was the Azure Dragon Strike. He didn't stop and kept attacking with his strong techniques. The monk started laughing and asked the master how long he would fight back. Deso got angry and replied that he was just a damn monk. Deso decided to attack and said he was honestly trying to hold back and applied striving for virtue. A dragon and tiger strike. The monk dodged the blow and was a bit even surprised. But Deso continued to attack and applied a thunderous assault. The mercenaries were surprised and said that their junior master was incredible. And this is no joke to them. He is so brilliant that any praise pales in comparison. Deso blushed and said it was nothing. But Monk at that moment attacked the Lord with a tiger fist. The lad didn't even have time to dodge before he fell to the ground. Monk said it felt good, and like stomping on the god of war in his younger years. Deso asked Mr. Buddha to make him stop, but the monk kicked him off his foot and replied that less words, more action. The monk was shocked and shouted that this is life, a whole new sensation. He must have been living a miserable existence for too long if the Buddha had given him a chance. But the monk smiled and said he'd do the same to him, and they clashed in the center of the field, fist to fist. Deso couldn't resist the double blow and was thrown to the side. But Monk held his ground and asked the master how long he would take the blows. Deso replied that no, and told the old man that he had definitely used the negun he had accumulated over the past 10 years. Same technique, but why did only him get thrown back? Monk asked the boy, did he think they could be the same? The fist of a boy who had only trained for a day against the fist of someone who had spent his whole life training. And then Deso realized why his father had chopped off that monk's hand. And he apologizes for not being able to see the depth of his wisdom. And he'd lay down his bones to make a beater out of his head. The monk laughed at him and said that the gentleman was a long way from being 100 years old. But Deso took advantage of this moment and attacked with his tiger fist. The mercenary said that if the Lord hit the same way, he would get hit again, and he would rather beat up their little master too. Deso applied a 1,000-fold hammer at the last moment, but Monk smiled and answered the master with a tiger punch. Deso just happened to be smarter this time and beat up the old man with different attacks. Deso said that he would compensate for the lightness of his body with a 1,000-fold hammer and replace the missing arm length with a leg. Who said there should only be a fist? Deso flew at him with 2 feet and used the skull technique. The monk smiled and replied that it wasn't bad, and with a wave of his hand, he knocked him right off his feet in mid-air. Deso was just shocked and didn't know how it happened, and afterwards, Monk did the same kick and with a straight leg flew into the Lord's head. Deso realized that Monk could also replace the tiger's fist with his foot, and it really wasn't fair. Mu walked up to the gentleman and said that he was completely out of it, that he had experienced it personally. And how was it? The monk replied that it is truly an unheard-of talent. The flow of Negong, the 5 elements that allow one to find the next stage of a mastered technique on one's own, and his innate intuition, but most importantly, his determination to not give up until the very end. But who among all the warriors here wouldn't wish to possess such a talent? Mu said that their young master would be busy learning all these fighting techniques. In the evening, Deso came to his senses and held on to the back of his head, and tried to remember how many times he had managed to fall on his back. But then Deso looked around and saw the mercenaries fighting each other, and he didn't know why they were doing it. Suddenly, one of the mercenaries fell down beside him, and mercenary asked the gentleman, "Is he awake yet?" The mercenary said someone came to him as he slept, but they talked and sent him back. Deso was surprised and asked, "To him?" The mercenary replied that by the looks of it, someone very noble. And he had no interest at all in what was going on in the world when he was locked away in the mountains, studying martial arts alone. Deso watched the mercenaries fight, and he could hear them arguing with each other and fighting like in a real battle. Deso asked, "Did they collectively eat something wrong?" The monk answered him to leave them alone. They will live together from now on, so a hierarchy must be established. Deso asked, "Then why won't the 2 of them join the fight?" The monk replied that it would be boring that way. After all, they are on a different level. Deso noticed that even the fights unfolding before his eyes looked impressive. How strong are the old men then? Mu told the kid that if he tried hard too, he could surpass them in strength. Deso asked in surprise, "Really?" The monk replied that the Lord would try until blood sweat and become stronger than the 2 of them. And if trained like a madman, perhaps the heavenly demon himself, or even the god of war would become no match for him. Deso took hold of his heart and said he would try it then, and they would try to do it,